is 8:04. We are here for a joint meeting of multiple boards. I hereby call to order and open the meeting of the Select Board, which does have a quorum, and we will go around the room to the left.
8:04 still, and the Finance Board has a quorum, and we will open our meeting.
It's 8:04 3/4. And the planning board hereby opens this meeting.
It's 8:05, and we have a quorum. CIPC opens this meeting.
Excellent. All right, why don't we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As noted in the agenda, these meetings, as per usual, at least with some of the boards, are being recorded for transmission on Rutland Public Access TV, as well as on YouTube. We are here tonight to talk about the fall special town meeting. We have a very large warrant that right now is hovering around 4 dozen articles, and we have, again, multiple boards here, so we're going to be talking about best practice, about where everybody is in terms of comfort level. We're talking about quite a bit of money that's going to be expended. I believe you all have a free cash usage report in front of you as well. And that's kind of the opening. I guess I would ask if any of the other boards, as well as the FinCom, wanted to comment on how they'd like the evening to go. We are getting a really late start relative to most of our meetings. I'm expecting that everybody wants to be here until 11. So hopefully we can make a lot of progress relatively quickly. It's possible that some of these we'll be able to run through and are kind of no-brainers, whereas others will require a little bit more discussion. So FinCom?
I think we just like to start and just go right through them. And
Just
get
start
it
with
going. It's quicker that way. We have an order, we have everything in here. Let's
Okay.
just run through it.
Planning?
It shouldn't take that long. It shouldn't. It really shouldn't.
All right,
Let's get it going.
let's get it going.
Yep, CIPC favors moving
Right.
along.
Mike?
Sure. So those of you who have books in front of you, not all were able to be lettered in time for tonight, but the way those books work is item A on the Karen, it looks like you have an old book, just to, but I can get you the numbers that corresponds
Here,
to.
Karen, take mine. You're,
I'm fine.
Um,
I've looked through this stuff plenty of times.
okay.
Item A on the warrant, again, these haven't been numbered by the select board yet, so they have item numbers attached to them, corresponds with the first section of your book. Item B with the second section, and so on from there. So if you follow along with your book, the first tab will be the first item on the warrant.
Which tab is the overall warrant?
It was loose leaf on top of me.
Yeah, Joe.
No, I think I have it.
Yeah.
It's in the pile on the bottom. I was looking for it in the book. Thank you.
The other so these will all be updated, and will be made electronically and emailed out, to everyone who's at this room too. That way you have it, all the information you need before town meeting as well. The loose leaf package that was on top of your binder includes some updated information that we've received since the binders were made, as well as the free cash usage report, that if everything on the warrant were to pass, this is where we'd stand with regard to free cash. We are using a conservative projection for our free cash that should be certified soon, of $800,000. I expect that'll go up, but I would rather not see that until we have a certified number by the state. And I'd also like to note that we have Director Buckley from the DPW, Director Nichols from the Council on Aging, and our town accountant Dan Haynes here as well with us. And want to just start at the top?
Yeah, we're gonna start in. So when you start looking at your warrant, anything all the way down, I wanna say until page, looks like 7, maybe 8 have already been placed by the board. Yep.
Yeah. So the way that the warrant is formatted is I broke it into pieces. Everything from the Department of Revenue, they said if we don't pass at this town meeting, they wouldn't let us set our tax rate, is the first section. So where you see these subheadings won't be in the warrant when it's posted, but it says section 1, and goes through up to section 6. Within those sections are individual subsections. Anything that's under subsection .1 has been placed by the board already. Anything that's under subsection .2 has not been placed by the board yet. Within
Those are labeled in here.
Yes, those are labeled in your warrant. And within those individual subsections, things are listed from highest dollar amount to lowest dollar amount. And if you look at the free cash usage sheet, you can kind of get an example of that. If you look to the general free cash expenditure section, it starts with the 41,000, goes down to the 1,500, and then back up to the 58,000. That's where the break will be in the warrant itself. But you can see that as we follow along there as well. But that way it breaks it up. The way the sections goes is water and sewer from the DOR, the financial policies, bylaws, budget, supplementation requests, and then general free cash expenditures.
All right, give it a shot. Is the FinCom planning on taking votes tonight?
No.
No, just a review. Okay. So, I guess we're gonna jump in, and I mean, however your chairs individually wanna do it. Certainly the hope with the way the room is set up tonight is that this is a more open discussion. I don't know that recognition is necessary, right? I think we'll probably have a pretty good discussion without that. So, item A, jumping right in, this is the one where we are appropriating, from our water, sewer, free cash, the money to pay the outstanding fourth quarter bill from DCR. You'll see that in your A in your binder, that amount, $213,477.09. And like I say, if there's questions, please jump in, I don't need to.
What is the projection on the combined water, sewer, enterprise free cash?
550,000 after expenses paid.
550?
Yep.
And
The,
what portion of that, Mike, is basically carryover from the existing water enterprise?
the water enterprise closed at 785, we're projecting, Dan? 740, excuse me, 740. Sewer closed with a deficit of 235. That 550 is the remaining amount to be put into the joint enterprise account. And these are all, again, still to be certified by the state.
All right, next one. As you know, at the May town meeting, we were making an attempt to close the individual water and sewer enterprise accounts, combining those into free cash so they could be recertified. They are then, according to Article B, item B, getting placed back into a now combined water sewer enterprise account. Again, this was placed.
The reason why I put this one after that is because the amount that gets transferred from free cash into this joint enterprise account is dependent on the money that we pay the bill with. So once the bill is paid, the remaining amount will be put in.
I'll go through C and D together. Those are the votes that DOR is requiring us to take that will officially rescind, that word was important, the existing water enterprise account effective June 30, 2019, and then item D to rescind existing sewer. Just gonna keep going unless anybody speaks up. All right, here we go. That's why you start meetings at 8:04. Yeah? Okay. Our item E, this is the borrowing amount. This was worked into the new rates. Joe is here to speak, I would guess most likely to this one. Joe's one of your big ones.
If you have a question.
Yep, if anybody needs it. So there's your borrowing amount of $3 million. Joe has provided, and it might be in your book, a water and sewer, excuse me, 5-year capital plan that explains out what's gonna happen with that $3 million.
Question, is that 3 million going as a bond? What's that going as? Does it?
Go ahead.
If you turn to the attached pages with that section, Becky has put out what's being put in as a bond, the bond, when we're paying the interest and so on from there, so you have the full financial payback on the attached sheets as well. As your, that can be more easily seen on the 11 by 17 page that's currently folded over to fit into your binder. If you unfold that, you'll be able to see the full payback schedule.
I guess I'm asking, is this on the water and sewer users or on the whole town?
Users.
Okay.
This is only.
Oh, I was curious about it.
And the repayments for this loan were built into the recent rate increases.
Okay. Now we'll have the next question.
Well, I do, I see capital plan, but haven't seen it in CIPC. So there's a $3 million bond that we're gonna be, doing work, and I understand the concept, it's not news. I know this was part of the process that we've had discussions on in the last several months, since town meeting. But it is a capital plan, that hasn't been considered by the capital committee.
So would you like Joe to come out to you guys to get that process started?
Yeah, I guess the concern I have, though, is the process for the capital budget cycle is starting now in the form of collection of, the items that the various town departments need, with the intent that the CIPC will go through its process and offer recommendations for the annual town meeting in May, not for a special town meeting in a few weeks.
I think we need to consider with capital relative to the enterprise accounts and not every ratepayer, how you might want to handle that going forward. I guess probably in the room we all sort of knew we were taking a new tack in terms of how we were dealing with capital expenses when it came to water and sewer infrastructure, relative to what Joe wanted to do, which was borrowing as opposed to saving up, right, from retained earnings.
Well, a couple quick things. Sorry, if you don't mind if I speak.
Yeah, no.
When we got the rate study back, we had basically two options on the table. If we wanted to try and fund capital improvements with just the rate, that rate was higher than if we borrowed money to do capital improvements. So we went with the borrowed option, and that's the rate we currently have. So that's what drove that decision. I do believe we've sent drafts of the capital plans to your group a couple of times, but I have not gone to present them, no.
Right.
We couldn't get them off the ground until the rate structure has actually been approved and funded. So the first batch of monies coming in under the new rate takes effect is actually this quarter. So we couldn't even fund any of that if we wanted to. But I would caution you on one aspect of all of this, and that's the most critical repairs to the water system. We had 5 breaks in 2 weeks. About a month ago. We have to start making some improvements to the water system. We have no other way to fund it, so.
Yeah, and I wouldn't argue that, Joe. I certainly know there's a need. I'm simply making a point.
Oh, okay.
That, we have a process for capital needs. Built into that process is emergency needs. So if this falls into that category that we have an emergency need, then it can be handled a little bit differently than the typical process. And maybe that's what this is, if we're dealing with breaks and service and whatnot. But I want to make sure that anytime a capital item, and it's defined clearly, is brought up, that it should go through the process.
Shouldn't this go through the Sewer and Water Commission?
It should go through both. I mean, the board is the Water Sewer Commission,
Right.
but just like anything else, the board sets the warrant for everything else as well, so it goes through them in that case too. So any capital item should go through CIPC, and obviously everyone else is a stakeholder in it as well.
Where I'm stuck is, we want to borrow the money in a lump sum for the next 5 years.
Right.
And we also want to make the repairs as early as May or June of this upcoming year. If we were to put it out on the, in the open market to bid it, it goes out on the market as early as, say, January, to be able to start construction in May. I don't know it doesn't fit good against the process in the current, we're against the wall in the manner with which we want to borrow the money.
Well, it would have if we had done this 6 months ago, is the only point I'm making.
So I think the question then, Joe, is moving forward, I'm trying to think of examples of the last time we did sort of massive capital water sewer. And I don't actually think, when you and I started, the CIPC was not yet even in existence.
We've never done one to this magnitude. The
Right.
last one that we did was the couple $100,000
Right.
one that,
Right.
kind of caused some issues.
Yeah, so to that point, knowing that in your triaging system, this is a separate entity because it is doing, just the ratepayers, I'm wondering if it's something that we now need to revisit, knowing that our new director is taking this forward in a new direction relative to the capital that he just explained, right, the 5-year borrowing, a much larger addressing of the capital needs of the system. This has been hard, obviously, we have residents coming into our meetings who are frustrated and upset and wanting to know when the work is starting. And you're looking here now at this 5-year plan, so to your point, 2020, we're in it. So what would you like, Joe, what would you like us to do as the water sewer commissioners moving forward, whether it's, at the meeting?
Well, I don't think it's anything different than what's been stated for a lot of years now, that capital items go through CIPC before they're placed on a warrant. So obviously, there was intent to place us on the warrant some time ago, and that it should follow the process. That's all I'm asking, nothing more.
So, okay, so the capital, the 5-year borrowing, CIPC will take a larger look at this moving forward for the final 4 years, which haven't come yet?
Well, it doesn't sound like we need to if it's being placed on a warrant to borrow the money now.
I mean, I would think do you still want input into the way this process is gonna move forward with these lists? We're gonna approve the borrowing, but it won't all get borrowed, is that right?
See,
Yes, but you placed it on the warrant, you're going to give that to the taxpayers who are
Oh, yeah.
going to be there.
Yes.
So now, it's kind of a moot point for the CIPC to say anything
That's-
because you've
that's
given it
exactly
to, he was trying to say it nicely, and I was like, listen, it's getting late. You're giving it to the townsfolk, saying, here's what we're gonna do. It's not really right to ask them to go back and say, yeah, you can't do that, because that's defeating the whole purpose.
So I guess this is why we're here. It's technically been placed, but are there people in the room that would have preferred to see it not placed with all information that we have in front of us?
I don't think you have a choice with what I've seen in the last 2 or 3 months with the water system.
yeah, and I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if I'm understanding Joe correctly, it's more not disagreeing with the placement in the sense that CIPC wasn't involved kind of from the beginning, because this has happened fairly quickly. We didn't have this until we had the rates set, which we didn't set the rates until, June or July. So I think that, if I'm understanding correctly, you are wishing that that CIPC had been involved from the very beginning, basically.
Yeah,
This
again,
timeline.
it was just a point. I do think we're a bit late. I don't know that much can be done about it. I agree that we have, needs that probably need to be met. It's just a desire that, should this happen again, that it go through the process. That's all.
And for my information, in the past, CIPC has been involved in the water sewer capital projects also?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
There just haven't been that many,
Yeah.
and certainly not to this magnitude. You did.
And we understand most of it is infrastructure. We're not putting up a new building.
No.
We're not doing any of that. It is infrastructure.
I got a problem.
But if that, again, coming down, if that infrastructure is gonna last more than 5 years, then
Hopefully.
it becomes, a capital, a CIPC issue. That's all. And I understand, I saw some of the stuff you sent, Joe, but it didn't rise to the magnitude that we thought it would even be an issue this year. So, I did see that, but.
The only thing I left out is, we're also on the hook with some of the regulators that we
Yeah.
answer to, the DEP, especially on the water side. They're looking to see us make some improvements to our system.
Okay.
And may I ask another question for the process side of things? If Joe's included kind of BOS, CIPC, FinCom, I think, maybe, on a lot of the documentation and everything, would that be up to Joe, us to reach out to CIPC and say, hey, we need to work together on this? Or would that be CIPC looking at things and saying, oh, actually, this is a capital plan that we need to be involved with? I guess
Yeah.
it's a process thing. I don't care how it goes.
And we had a good conversation. We had a CIPC meeting right before this meeting, and we had a good conversation with Mike to kind of go over the process. And, the CIPC, the requirements for it are pretty clearly defined. So what we had talked about with Mike is, there's an actual form that is filled out for a capital request. And, Margaret had kind of instituted a process, and we had talked about kind of carrying it forward with Mike, of screening CIP's capital requests through the town administrator before it reaches CIPC to be officially considered.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say that Joe has been very good at coming to the CIPC for the most part and requesting stuff and putting information, good information too, for us. So I will say that of Joe.
Here. All right, I'm gonna keep moving. We might revisit this, obviously, that's a big one. I think pretty much all of those required, so we'll continue to utilize items into the meeting. Page 2, under section 2, financial policies, I'm just gonna clump these together. Items F, G, and H have been placed. They are pretty standard for us for the special town meeting, where we have money available from certified free cash. We'll be placing percentages of that money based on the financial policies in each of stabilization, capital stabilization, and OPEB trust fund. You have that under your letter, F.
Yep.
With the percentages, the totals that are currently in each amount, each account, and the percent of the budget, with the suggested deposit numbers, which of course will be in the motions. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Would love to get some input on this. We held off on placing the next two, so you're looking at the bottom of page 2, 2.2, items I and J, to see if the town will take some of our free cash, again certified, to place in the town's conservation fund, as well as the new agricultural commission fund, which was recently created. And I can speak to that.
When going through our financial policies, similar to how the capital stabilization and general stabilization fund have a specific goal to reach, where the balance in that account is equivalent to a certain percentage of the annual operating budget. We had historically, based on what I had seen, been transferring money into the capital stabilization, and OPEB fund. But there is a financial policy in there that says we should be working toward obtaining a balance in our conservation fund of 2% of the annual operating budget. We are currently at 0.5% of the 0.05% of the annual operating budget in that account. So since I put forward recommendations for the other items in the financial policies, that's why I included this one as a warrant article. In reading through the purpose of the conservation account, the things that it can do and its purpose for being set up are very similar to the requirements and items that could be done with the agricultural fund that was made at this May's town meeting, so I included that as well, just to put those on an even playing field. But the conservation was based off of our financial policies.
What number was that from?
Was that?
You just added
Was
those.
these two ones not on our meeting from last week?
Yes. The amounts, just to go through them all, for stabilization and capital stabilization, $32,500, that comes off of 5% of our expected free cash. The OPEB account, $6,500, that's about 1% of our projected free cash. That's based off of conversations with our accountant and our actuary. And then for conservation and agriculture, because we hadn't been doing this before and there's such a thick warrant with items that are being requested, I put as a suggestion $3,250, which is 0.5% of our expected annual free cash.
The board has not placed these yet. There was discussion about it. We'll be revisiting it probably on Monday, since we're still already at 8:30 tonight. Yeah.
If I may ask a question, Eleanor, this is being televised, right?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, could you explain what the op-ed, because it's,
OPEB?
yes.
Sure.
Oh, OPEB? Before I do that, just because it was pointed out to me, if you're following along on this sheet, there is a typographical error. That 3,750, reading through the page, excuse me,
32.
is supposed to be 3250. OPEB is a requirement, is a liability that the state places on us. Other post-employment benefits. To simplify it down to its most preschool level, is it, if government ceases to exist, we'll at least be able to pay our retirees' health insurance.
Okay.
It's money that once we set aside, we'll never be able to touch, because it can only be used in certain extreme emergency cases. So it's a liability, because we have to work towards paying it, and we have to put a good faith effort into doing so, which is why we're putting money into it to begin with. But again, after talking with our actuary, who runs that account, our town accountant who's here, it's not something we have to go full aggressive on.
Okay.
where we have so many other things that are looking for funding.
Through the chair, to Mike, isn't it about $5 million though, is the liability on that?
5.4.
5.4 million.
We have about 298,000 in our OPEB trust.
Yes.
We're funded at about 5.5%.
Yes.
Wow.
Dan and I, when we were speaking with our actuary, the actuary informed us that the average statewide, because we have 3 OPEB accounts, we have one for each water, sewer, and then general fund. The average for both general fund and enterprise across the state is 1% funded, and in our lowest funded OPEB account, which is the general fund, we're still 5 times more than the state average. So that's why they said it's okay for us to step back on this one a little bit.
Is the OPEB, the article on this one, Mike, does that encompass the 3 different, or I guess it's gonna be 2 different?
This would just be general fund. The
So
way
there's no action taken on the enterprise
those were
side?
taken in May as part of the operating
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
For the time being.
so that means the board's still gonna be hashing those other 2 out, 3250 conservation and ag.
What's the intent of the spend, or, like,
I think
it's gonna
the
be
in-
banked and used for
I
what?
think the intent is seed money. Both the conservation and ag have defined capabilities of managing property that they might purchase for conservation purposes and agricultural purposes. Clearly, I think as Mitch pointed out, nobody's gonna be getting a lot of land for $3,200, $3,250, but we have to start somewhere in creating the agricultural fund in particular, and knowing that the state laws have changed such that AgCom has some additional powers relative to managing property. It's probably the right step in the right direction. But predicated on available free cash, and so, people feel like at the end of the day, looking at our totals, we would certainly love to hear from you.
And again, the reason why it wasn't included in last week's finance committee meeting was because when I went back to re-review the financial policies to make sure I hit everything the way it was supposed to be hit, that's when I saw that conservation's fund was included.
I guess if you're looking for feedback, my feedback is we have a lot of needs,
Yep.
other than the unknown needs. There's known needs, and I think that's where I'd put my priority, but that's just my feedback because you asked for it.
Thank you. That's what we want, feedback. All right,
And wasn't the agricultural one set up also mainly so they could accept gifts and other kind of donations?
They can also accept gifts, yes,
So-
absolutely.
Like you said, that number's not gonna do a lot, and the account is open and available for that other biggest part of the purpose.
Yep. True.
There is a gift.
Well, like the chair said, it wasn't
Gift coming.
placed, so if you guys have a strong feeling one way or another.
Does the agriculture committee have any use of that money for expenses, bills, things like that?
Not really. Annually, they have not spent, they've been working on a budget of $250 for several years now in a row. It simply hasn't come up.
But we have been spending quite a bit of money from the Friends of Ag.
That's true. That's true. The Friends have been very supportive.
Do we think, because this is something that came up at the town meeting last year too, it might be helpful for everyone if Ag and Concom maybe came in and spoke to some of their priorities, or what their what the capabilities are to use this money for, so that everyone's more clear on that, just to kind of avoid, future
Yeah.
questions.
I wonder if maybe the chairs are available to come in on Monday and try.
Okay. Just to let you know
But you said
that.
that is part of our policy, though.
The conservation is, not the agriculture, yes. But the
Just conservation.
policies were written 3 years before the ag fund was created.
Agriculture, in case an APR is requested from a landowner, the town used to put in a certain amount, and now this could be help to fund that.
Yep.
Oh. We'll also note that Chairman Crane from the Conservation Commission is in the other room running the cable studio right now, too.
That's true. Maybe he'll run out. It's true. All right, I'm gonna move on. And again, we can circle back to anything we want to talk about more, but I'm gonna keep going. We're on to page 3. You've got item K, which the board is sponsoring. They did place it, the creation of a housing trust. There is going to be a handout which our planner has prepared.
I've got an old, because I don't have that in K, I've got a fiscal, I've got the planning board, the
requirements on K.
Yeah, I
If
agree.
you,
It might not be K in your books.
It's K on mine.
Whoa, yeah.
If you're
I
lucky, it's
have
K.
it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
If not, it's O.
that's what I've got for K, you do too.
Oh, you know what, it might be K, but hold on. No, so just, and we actually did this just the other day. Your cover pages on the letters in your binder might actually be the same. If you go behind that cover page, you actually will see on the second page, the acceptance of MGL Chapter 44, which is the establishment of a housing trust.
Oh, so the first one doesn't count.
Can you just go about what it is?
Yeah, Mike and I are gonna tag team.
yeah, absolutely. The reason why they have the same cover page is that the town planner, Dave George, submitted the same cover page for all of the items he requested in the warrant. So the one that has the star next to it is what's in that section.
Okay.
As part of working towards updating the town's master plan, the town planner is looking at applying for grant funding to do a housing production plan that helps the town work towards reaching its affordable housing goal of 10%. We are currently at 3%. This process would require that the town seat a housing committee, of which there are two options: a general housing committee that has little oversight, or a housing trust that operates with a greater state statute that, if you turn the page, the state law that goes with it is attached to that as well. It allows them to set certain regulations for housing projects, particularly low-income housing. It does allow them to control land, and there are other items there as well. I spoke with our town council this morning as she is reviewing the warrant language for the select board's meeting on Monday, and doing some revisions, no major revisions we don't think have to be made to the language of the warrant that's before you. But she did inform me that while this is something that is an acceptance of Massachusetts state law, this will have to be put in bylaw format. So what you see in the MGL printout will have to be just converted to a bylaw standout. Bylaw format, town council is doing that for us, and we will have that tomorrow. I've informed the bylaw subcommittee, the bylaw ad hoc committee about this. They are aware of it, and they will be looking at it at their next meeting, but they understand that this needs to go to the warrant, so they are fine with that.
Isn't this a zoning bylaw?
This is actually not considered a zoning, because
It
it's
says zoning act right here. Description, this article to update the board's charged with the zoning act and remove ambiguous language right above the 2/3 vote. Is that, D, is that for the other one?
That's part of the other one, yes.
Okay.
You start at the star where it says Article D and go under.
Do we have anywhere in town right now that's zoned for affordable housing, or?
I'd have to check the zoning bylaw. I don't know the specific places. We must have it if it's
There's
required.
none.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think we did.
No, there is not.
Probably not.
Okay.
Mike, what does the town gain by establishing a housing trust?
Mainly just fulfilling the requirement of overseeing the housing production plan. It's a committee to, as we move forward with major housing projects in the town, it's an extra step to go through to make sure that we're working toward obtaining our goal of the state not mandated but highly suggested 10% affordable homes, and things of that nature.
If I can too, this
Yeah.
is also, it plays into the community compact that the Commonwealth set up, which those areas of priority can be used for the town to pursue future avenues of funding in terms of economic development and housing. So they're usually community compact items are tied to grant funding when we apply for grants. So it's also part of that as well.
Correct, which is where we're looking to get the money for the housing production plan that goes along with this.
Harry, it's also a first step in allowing the town to at least have a consideration of possibly doing its own, for example, senior housing project. That would help us with our percentages as well.
I mean, I have no issues with it. I'm thinking, how many people live here? And we're looking at a housing trust? So it's just kind of blew my mind a little bit there, you know, in terms of that's why I asked, what benefit does the town gain
Yeah.
from that? So,
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yes, through our chair.
Okay.
How does that affect, we've got subdivision bylaws that handles 40B and already handles senior housing, so how, are we gonna have overlap here?
The town would be able to
There might
build
be.
senior
We
housing.
don't have anything.
The town would be able to build senior
Not 40B.
housing?
I mean, it's not,
That wouldn't be the only part of it.
no, not at all. But as an
So
example,
who would
you-
handle the review, site plan and all that stuff of the town-built property?
I think the review process is the same.
Yeah.
We could probably take a very good look at neighboring communities that already
Okay.
have their
Yeah.
housing trusts set up and are doing affordable housing.
Yeah.
All right.
Pretty good.
But again,
long
that,
list
the town building stuff would not be the only action of this trust.
of it. No, not at
But I
all.
mean, this also just, this gives us the ability to create it. I would imagine that once this process is started, that the appropriate boards and committees would be consulted and brought in as to the process.
Correct.
That would be my understanding.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Alright, I'm gonna move forward with Article L. Again, this was placed, the police department chief requested this, that he be able to set a reasonable proper speed limit on town roads within, put that quotation marks, thickly settled or business districts at 25. I think everybody has a memo from him clarifying question that the board had on its meeting Monday night relative to what would that look like, when would it go into effect, and he wanted to clarify that, of course, as soon as the statute is voted in, this wouldn't be a change that would automatically kick in.
Correct. This was a loose leaf item on top of your binders when you came in, so you received it after the binders were sent. It lists the streets that this would affect, as well as what the chair just said as for how this would play out to pass.
Has there been a lot of complaints regarding speeding that he's going through this
Yes.
process? So
Yeah.
he just didn't come off the top of his head for it?
No, this is in response to several calls we've received.
And if I'm not mistaken, these look like all subdivision roads.
No,
Not all, but that's our main thickly settled areas.
All right.
And to me, 25 in some of the subdivisions still seems fast, but I know I've been there when people have been going much faster through, so.
I would welcome
drive like
15
that after 20.
on my street, honestly. Any place where there's kids, 30 miles an hour is state law for thickly settled, and that's, you know,
That's
Scary.
fast.
It's just the
very
bar,
fast.
that's the bar they set, and that's why they give us the opportunity to
To
set
lower.
our houses, so.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
All right, I'm moving on, so with that,
Just
oh,
with that as well, to answer some other questions that I received regarding this article, is how this gets posted. After I talked to the chief about this, I asked him to call other chiefs to see what they had done in towns where this was done. What's the common theme that's been done is a sign is posted at the entrances to town that says thickly settled area, thickly settled areas 25 mile per hour speed limit. At the entrances to town, that way we don't have to post at every area a 25 mile per hour speed limit sign or a thickly settled speed limit sign. So that was the answer to the other question that I received.
Thanks, Nick, for follow-up information also.
I was just noticing that none of our scenic roads are listed. Which those are probably the lower quality roads where speed is, you know, more important.
I think your road should be 5 miles an hour.
Those would probably have to go to a separate process, because this, under the state law, only allows it for designated thickly settled or business districts. And I think that's why the scenic roads didn't fall into that. I don't disagree, I think they should be slower on those roads, don't get me wrong. But this state law is only for thickly settled, which is your house is within X number of feet of each other, over a quarter of a mile, or a designated business district.
Just a few little potholes and all.
I know one of them that is becoming thickly settled.
Well, then we'll be all set in a couple of years.
The note from Nick does say that as, people should also realize that as more homes are built and as the town accepts more streets, this list will become longer as more streets become thickly settled, so.
work in progress.
Right.
All right, moving on, page 3, we're on section 3.2. These next articles have not yet been placed by the board. We knew that the planning board was meeting the day after our first review of all the warrant articles, and so they are here tonight. I'm gonna hand this over to Norm and just note for you that, again, your cover pages are the same, but you're looking at M, N, and O in your binders, and this is for zoning bylaw changes, 2/3 votes at the meeting for frontage, lot regularity, and ZBA comments.
And in your cover page, the one you want to look at is the one that's starred for that one. So for instance, next to Article A, there's a star. That's because that is the frontage one. And the planning board's having their public hearing on this on Tuesday, I believe?
Yes.
Correct.
It's major but a minor change. We're simply adding one word to the definition of frontage, and that word is contiguous. At this point, an acceptable lot can have frontage in bits and pieces along a road with breaks in between it. Okay, and that tends to lead to, let me just say, some very creative engineering on the part of some civil engineers. And we're trying to kind of, I guess I'll say, plug that loophole to make things a little bit more regular. It's a common item in other towns' bylaws.
I think it's state stature anyway, to have continuous frontage, no?
No.
The town council will fill this in and straighten us out.
Really?
Does it impact open space type setups?
Yes, well.
Depends on the civil engineer.
I mean, because open space, there's some benefits to open space. If it shuts the door on that, it may.
Does open space reduce frontage?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it just has to be continuous now?
That's all, that's
Is
all.
that-
And I'm
That's
I'm
big
just
though.
trying to think
Yeah, it can be. That's
in
big.
my
It can be
head,
big
if
in open
there's
space.
any open space lot that has been approved that would be affected by this, and I really don't think so. Simply because almost all of those are on newly proposed roads. So they can adjust, you know, the actual wattage.
Size and lot.
And the lot configuration. It is more for things like A&R lots on older existing roads, you know, where someone might own a fairly large chunk of property and they sold off a piece of it right in the middle of it, and now they have 50 feet of frontage on one side of it and 100 feet of frontage on the other, and say, oh yeah, we got the 150.
Sure, but but like you said, it's for A&R technically, but if you have open space coming in front of it, it could affect how that is done.
It's possible, yes.
But if it comes before us, we'll probably say no.
The thing is, open space is by special permit only, and we have.
Would that
gives us
override
services
this?
on that.
Special permit override this?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if that's a consideration for you, but I mean, we have a few open space layouts in town. I happen to live in one of them, and I think there's a benefit to them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Actually, since, correct me if I'm wrong, Dick, since we adopted our open space design bylaw, we have not had a standard conventional subdivision plan approved.
Correct.
So, you know, it seems as though that, you know, conventional is almost non-existent anymore. I believe also slow-moving, but I believe even in Boston, there is a push to make open space design a by right bylaw rather than a special permit.
Correct.
Article B.
That's not starred.
Not starred. Now you gotta go to N, then it'll be B.
Did you want to go into lot regularity one at all, or the ZBA?
See if I can do it in not too many words. Once again, this is an attempt, I guess, to limit the irregularity of some
Illusory,
lots.
right, we would say, if I may.
Well, it also has something sort of to do with that. We had run into a number of requests for lots, and they were creating lots with frontage, but the frontage would in no way be able to actually access the lot.
Yeah.
Okay, we have found out that that is called illusory frontage and is not worthy of an endorsement by the planning board. However, as well, this does something, a little bit more than that. It requires that someone isn't going to just create a huge, long neck of very narrow land that then might expand out somewhere further and back to allow a house. The only other thing I would say is there will be two exceptions to this. And one of them is our estate net bylaw, which allows reduced frontage. And in our open space design option, we allow for what are called flag lots, which also allow reduced frontage. Those would not be affected by this.
As long as it's continuous.
As long as it's continuous.
Correct.
Or contiguous.
Contiguous, sorry.
We went round and round and round on, I'd love someone to actually be able to give me an absolute answer. Is there a difference between continuous and contiguous?
Oh, so the open space, going back to the other one, the open space may not be impacted.
As
You
long
can
as
still
it's
have, well, a single lot can have reduced frontage, as
Sure.
long as the frontage
Yes.
for that lot
Is
is
all in one.
contiguous somewhere else. I got you.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Norm, can you define, so what is the difference then between a flag lot, like you just said, and a lot that, like, what is the difference between the two lots in terms of how this would impact those? I mean, what is a flag lot?
Flag lot basically allows frontage to be reduced, I believe, to 40 feet, where normally, for example, in the R40 area, we require 150 of frontage.
Okay.
Okay, but
It looks
not-
like a flag. You'll
Well, I was
come up
gonna
with a
say,
skinny and then it opens up with a house.
But I mean,
like
that just sounds like what you talked about with a lot that has maybe like a really long, like a narrow access point, and then it kind of balloons out. What's the difference between those two and how this will impact those?
A&Rs.
Mostly on A&Rs, yeah.
Just curious.
Which seems to be the majority of our business these days.
Yes. Individual lots.
Individual lots, all over the place.
ZBA?
Hmm?
ZBA?
ZBA, to the best of my understanding, the purpose of the addition of one line, if I can read, if I can find it, Where is it? Okay, so on that last page, under the proposed zoning board powers, it's the last page in this particular section. It's the underlined part at the bottom of the paragraph. The Board of Appeals shall not grant use variances. And this is to bring it in alignment with Mass General laws as a power, or I don't know, I guess a restriction, I guess you'd say, of the zoning board of appeals. This became an issue fairly recently, where the ZBA, I think, probably lost a lot of weight and sweat trying to decide on what they could or couldn't do.
The question that was at issue at that ZBA meeting is in the existing bylaw to authorize upon appeal a petition in case where a particular use is sought for which a permit is not required, was considered ambiguous language. State statute says if the zoning board of appeals is allowed to grant a use variance, then it must specifically state in the enumerated powers of the board of appeals may grant a use variance. The issue was that the definition of what would be considered a structural variance as to the size of the lot used the word use in that definition. So there was some confusion there. So this is looking to just clean that up based on the town planner's recommendations.
That wasn't dry enough for you, okay. We're gonna go on to the next one, again, also not placed, there were some significant questions on this one, and we have a gentleman who just walked in the room and took off one hat and has now put on his earthworks hat, so we're on to P, which is the earthworks bylaw, and the significant change, again, looking for comment, I know he's gonna have some comments for you, is the first section, purpose A, where this earthworks board would be able to adopt its own regulations. So there's been some conversation about a board such as this, which is comprised of a combination of elected and appointed officials, whether or not there's any background in adoption of regulations, and Mike will add to that, and then we'll go to you, Peter.
I spoke with Mr. Crane earlier today as well, following my conversation with Attorney Goldberg from KP Law. KP Law said this type of bylaws normally include a sentence, or as part of the sentence where they're allowed to promulgate regulations, the phrase "with the approval of the select board," to add that elected check and balance to it, and we received that today, and then I'll leave it to.
Well, can I, just for clarification, Earthworks Board is comprised of elected and appointed officials, but the Earthworks Board is appointed.
That is correct.
So it's an appointed board, but it's comprised of elected officials as well as appointed officials.
Correct. The vision for the Earthworks Board has always been for it to be a regulatory body, and there are two forms of regulation, well, two forms of regulatory methods. One is bylaw and one is simple regulations. Regulations are much easier to adopt, much easier to change. And as I say, the vision was always to have that power in the Earthworks Board. It was, forgive me, this is my first bylaw. I won't make some of the same mistakes in the future that I made on that one below these many years ago. Discussions with council told us that the wording, the original wording to regulate, was insufficient. So we took a swing with enact, is that the word we used in the?
Adopt.
Adopt, excuse me, to adopt regulation. And as Mike said, I've already changed my copy with the wording suggested by KP to promulgate regulations with approval of the select board.
The rest of the changes to the bylaw are all magisterial and clerical in nature.
That's right. Those are, we're in a very interesting time in bylaws, and I'll put on my bylaw committee chair hat. This bylaw has been through our complete codification modernization process, and that is the vast majority of changes in it. The explicit statement of what law allows this bylaw to be written. We have very common terminology we're using for membership appointments and terms and all of that. All the bylaws are getting this kind of change, and they do not change the effect of the law. We just make some things more clear.
All right.
Are there other questions I can answer for you?
No questions, but you may want to take the E out of regulations. Just a typo, that's all.
Oh, just a typo, sure. Fine.
All right, going on to section, thank you, Peter. Going on to section 4, supplemental budget requests. These have all been placed. We'll try to get through these fairly quickly. The first one, item Q, is a correction to something that, upon review, based on the video I think that Anita watched, we realized that a step got missed because there had been a motion to amend it from the floor. So you can see a certified copy of the vote from May 11th. Hooray for having to revisit the May town meeting. And you can see we're just going to revisit the expenses of the municipal departments with the sum that you see, which is not changing.
It was, yeah, it was when the Department of Revenue was doing their review of the town meeting, as well as Anita. I got both calls on the same day. When the amendment was made, the motion for the article did not specifically and explicitly state with $150,000 coming from free cash. That's why you turn to the next sheet, it's actually the handout that was given out at town meeting that explicitly states $150,000 of free cash was being used as budgetary assistance as outlined in the town's financial policies as a revenue source, for lack of a better term. So this is clarifying that so that the budget that was put forward that had this built on there has the revenue that it was built off, and the vote that the town took at the May town meeting continues with the intent of the body at that night.
I think the only thing is that should come from FinCom, not from the select board.
Okay, would you like to present that?
I think that's where it should come from since we did it.
All right, I'm just gonna finish out the page. Item R, sponsored the fire department. This is to match the SAFER grant that Chief Knight received. And you've got the backup on that. That's item R, that has been placed. Item S is to replenish the highway construction and maintenance supplies account because of the large repair that was done to the access road in front of, in between Napog and Central Tree Schools over the summer. That was not anticipated. And then item T, $8,200 for hiring a temporary employee.
You need to take a zero out of there. It's a little bit too much money.
82,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's supposed to be 8,200.
I read it as 8,200, didn't I?
Yes, you
Yeah, you did. It
See,
just-
I did. $8,200 for temporary employee. Mike can explain that a little bit further. We have a little bit of a situation where we don't want to out anyone. It's a bit of a delicate situation, but.
This is coming from my office as part of one of the hats that I wear as my role as administrator is the Human Resources Director for the town. We have an employee who is expected to go on maternity leave in February during the busiest time for that office for 12 weeks. The employee does have enough accrued time under the FMLA to be paid for that out of her accrued time. So we are looking to hire a temporary employee to cover that period of time while she's out to assist in that office. To do this, I checked the state contract. There is one firm that's listed on the state contract for a temporary employee. They gave me a quote of $22 and change, $22.56 per hour for the town. Of that amount, $16 and change would actually be paid to the employee. The rest would be covering the fringe benefits of that employee and any fees associated with that temp agency. The current employee makes a salary rate, an hourly rate of $18.96. So it's actually less than the employee is making, particularly when you count the fringe benefits that the employee is receiving as well. It's for a period of 12 weeks. This is one of the articles that is going to be getting a correction made by town council. It will specify that the employee works in which building the employee works, the town hall annex, and it will also explicitly state to hire a temp not to exceed 12 weeks, as per FMLA.
Questions, comments? Nothing? I keep going. All right, page 5. Item U has been placed, $6,100 for a broken heater coil in the HVAC unit at the public safety building. Item V, $2,500. This was an internal error. The money was used to make some purchases that were actually supposed to be used for heating fuel.
Yes, we have some new staff members in town, a fairly new amount that oversee certain billing processes. I am one of them who signs off on the bills, so I will take partial responsibility for this. We bought some supplies for the annex in general, a load of paper because that one copy machine that services the entire annex, some carpet cleaning, some supplies for the new e-permitting kiosk, things of that nature. None of this was associated with the recent renovations or work done in the town annex. That was all done with last fiscal year's money. But when those bills were paid, Joe gave me a call and asked why I spent $2,500 out of the annex fuel account. I said, well, what are you talking about? He goes, well, town annex supplies is the fuel account for the annex. It's not a general supply account. So Joe and I will be going back to fix the names of those accounts. And when we go back
It
to
is
the
annex
budget.
supplies by definition, but most of it goes to fuel.
Yes.
It hasn't gone up in years, so most of it goes to fuel.
Correct. So that is just a correction to replenish that money that I signed off on the wrong bill account for.
All right.
Why wouldn't it come out of the right bill account?
I don't know if those accounts would have enough funding levels after you put them all together, because they were approved on the idea that, oh, we've got enough money in that account to do it, yeah, it's okay, go ahead and do that.
But it was a paper purchase, you said, right?
No, I was just using that as an example of one of the
Oh.
many. We didn't purchase $2,500 of paper.
Well, that's what I don't know, Mike, I'm looking at this book, I'm thinking it's possible.
You're looking at it right. All right, item W is the recording secretary that has been posted. There's been some expansion to that role to cover night meetings for the board as well as the planning board, excuse me, the select board as well as the planning board. That has been placed.
In finance.
And finance, so.
Yes, but that $2,000 is not covering the planning board, nor is it covering the finance. It's
Correct.
covering the select board.
Only.
So, because that's
Correct.
included in theirs, ours is included, so
Correct.
although that is shared, the 2,000 is for your piece. Just make sure everybody's understanding of that, because
Yeah.
there's more to it than just that.
That's
Good
fair.
clarification though, also
Yeah.
for anybody watching, that
Yep.
that position's going to pay more than $2,000.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep, that it's an additional.
Correct.
Good point. Item X, $1,920, police chief wages. This is a correction. We noticed in the wage line item for Chief Monaco that as per his contract, he is supposed to be getting any COLA that the non-union contract employees are getting in a given fiscal year, and that was not accounted for.
Correct.
That amount is retro for the entire, inclusive of the entire fiscal year, is the best way, I guess, for me to phrase
Yeah.
that.
That would be the full amount of the COLA had he received it on July 1st for the entire fiscal year. That should have been included in the budget.
We're on Y?
We're on
X.
Y.
X.
I was about to go to Y.
Okay, all right. I
Ready?
was looking at the number on Y.
So,
Yeah, me too.
the number on Y, if you've
Yeah.
all been following the news, is that Chief Knipe is currently acting as the, what is his title? Is it
He's the
acting?
regional fire chief for Ocam and Rutland.
So, this article has not been placed because we all had questions about how this is going to work. OCAM, and if you look at your backup in Y, OCAM is going to be paying the town. Actually, this is a good reason why Dan is here. I know he's back there listening intently to every word. We have questions about how this is going to work. OCAM is going to be paying the town monthly, based on need,
Bi-weekly.
for Chief Knipe's services. That could and should be considered a receipt, but it's a receipt that we didn't estimate for, obviously, at the Maytown meeting.
This is being reworked by town council, just because it isn't interesting. The IMA that's included in your packet is a 3-month IMA with a 30-day extension option. This $13,000 would be if we were to continue with that regional agreement for the remainder of the fiscal year. That way, we don't have to go back to town meeting or call a special to refill that should that continue. No, we did receive a call from OCAM where they informed us that it's, I'm gonna say a 99.9% chance this will continue until the beginning of the fiscal year with the issues that have come up in OCAM. If you're not familiar with the backstory, the chief resigned recently, and the select board requested that Seth take over the department to help clean things up a bit over there. So this is appropriating the payments that we receive from OCAM into his salary line item, because the other option that they said was that he be hired as a part-time OCAM employee and do it as a side job. I personally didn't like that. I think he should be maintain his Rutland chief as his position, as that's his full-time job with us, and then does the OCAM work on top of that. So that is why that's in there. Town council's working on changing the language to get the wording of what I just said in a less confusing way.
Through the chair, I'll ask a simple question. How long does this last? Is this until they can
hire and go through the process of getting a chief there?
Yeah, they have an advisory commission
Okay, so
that's
they're
currently
going through
working.
that.
Yeah, and he's advising them on how to move forward with their department.
I just, because the town's expanding, it's a full-time job as chief here in town.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I just didn't want his time being taken away trying to service another town
The
on a
way-
My
long-term
understanding
basis.
is we're doing a lot of servicing up there now as it is, right?
Correct. We,
Because we don't have anybody in the department, so I was.
we do a third of their ambulance annual calls. No, excuse me, half of their annual ambulance calls. And we're there for 7 out of 10 of their fire calls as well.
Can I ask a question about this? So this isn't money that we're spending, we're getting compensated for, and it just allows us to process the compensation?
We have to process the
Yes.
conversation, and it's an odd one.
But that's why we're waiting for the wording to come back.
Correct.
Because this isn't proper wording in this.
And that was, one of my questions was, if we're appropriating this amount, which is $13,309.08, which would be if Chief Knight stayed on through the end of the fiscal year, what happens if we appropriate that sum, but then
It ends in March.
Right, he ends in March, or he ends after his 30-day extension. We've over appropriated some, so we asked for wording clarification.
Correct. And it's forthcoming. Tomorrow is what I'm told from Lauren.
This is, correct me, this is a quarterly salary that OCAM pays the chief for doing the work up there? At
It's
$13,000?
a OCAM budget for FY20 had $16,000 in change as their annual salary for their fire chief. So this is what's remaining in that salary account.
I wonder he doesn't stay.
It was part-time, but still. No. All right, so in case anybody's confused by that one, you will see very different language in the core.
I guess I have a question for FinCom especially. You guys are waiting, I assume, are waiting to hear wording from...
This wasn't on our.
This wasn't given to us last week.
Yeah.
Not really sure how it managed to get into
Right.
this when we closed the warrant well before our first meeting.
But yeah, this wording is not.
Okay.
Waiting for the correct.
Correct.
We'll
Okay.
discuss that our next meeting, 2 weeks.
Item Z is also a new addition from the select board. I want to let Mike and Joe explain this one, because I don't think I can do it justice. All you have in front of you under Z is a picture.
I went into the annex on Monday. It was, we'll call it Monday, it may have been Tuesday. And noticed it was chillier, I just thought it was me. And then every employee who works in the annex came in to ask if the heat was working that day. After the third person in a row, I called Joe and I asked if he could come take a look at it. The boiler had shut off. Joe went to restart it. It started, installed, and shut itself off. So we called R.J. McDonald, who is the person who works on, the firm that works on the boiler there, who informed us that for the past 2 years, the vent pipe for the underground storage tank at that building was broken, and that there was an agreement that he would only put in a quarter to a half of a tank at a time to, since the break was underground, to make sure that the tank didn't contaminate the soil on the edge of the break for the underground storage tank. This is a very minimal cost, less than $1,000, but it's something that was unexpected, and it's something that we're gonna be looking to change in the near future, because we have 2 underground storage tanks that are a very big risk to us. So we put it on just to,
Bring attention.
exactly.
So,
Change is gonna,
Yes.
what are you doing for $1,000? Like throwing in?
The,
Well, if you don't mind, it was cheaper because DPW excavated the break and exposed all the piping so that the plumbing contractor could come in and make a repair to the vent pipe. It probably would have been more expensive had they had to jackhammer out the asphalt and excavate it out, on our behalf, but instead we did it. So we did to keep some costs down. I have to tell you, I went and looked at the boiler myself. The burners may be 10 years old, but the boiler's original. It's probably as old as the annex itself.
as is the tank.
Yeah.
As is the tank.
Yeah, we had a brand new one over in the schoolhouse, didn't we?
Yeah.
Interesting.
in the loose,
The other tank, by the way, just is the community center.
In the
That's
community
also-
hall.
Community hall,
Yeah.
no. That's, no, the other underground storage tank.
Oh, okay, yes.
Community center.
Yes. The new boiler that was in the primary school building is the existing boiler in the community hall building. Our underground storage tanks are located at the annex in the community center. You'll notice in your loose leaf papers that were added as an addition to the binder, on top of them is the official documentation of the event that occurred. That way, because this is kind of a confusing one, we wanted you to have it.
So why is this a special article?
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling.
I think the Joe just said, it was a bit to bring attention to an issue.
We also,
Why, though?
when we requested, when I put it on through the fact that working on behalf of the board and where the board is allowed to place articles up until the warrant's posted, we didn't know how much it was going to be.
Yeah, but so knowing
got the price
knowing
today.
that it's $1,000, why do we need a special article for this?
And we haven't placed it yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
This is
just
brand new
seems
to us as
kind
well.
of.
It's a maintenance issue,
We
isn't it?
got
Yeah,
the, we
it's-
got the price today, otherwise it wouldn't have been on.
Fair enough. Okay, is everybody ready? We're on to page 6, section 5, free cash expenditures. As Mike noted on the loose sheet you have with the list of expenditures, he went from most expensive to least. I will run through these quickly. I expect there will be comments on most, if not all of them, so here we go. And we're in double letters now. So double A is 41,146.75 to purchase a Ford F-250 for the DPW director. AB, $35,000 to
Are we
fund-
not talking these?
I'm gonna run the page and then we're gonna talk. Is that all right? I know, they're all big. They're all big.
Okay.
I'm gonna run the page. AB, $35,000 feasibility design for the senior center. AC, $30,000, the town center LED notification sign. AD, $25,000, upgrade to the town computer systems for town offices. AE, $20,000, consultant to assist the town in the process of drafting a charter. And AF, 18,468, walkway for the community center. And we will go back to the top. Joe?
Well, I see AA, AB, and AC, they're all capital items that haven't come before the capital improvement.
So it was my understanding that the DPW truck had come before capital,
No.
no?
No.
That was actually misunderstanding.
Oh.
We had the same exact truck come through for fire, so I think there was some confusion there as to
No.
all of the trucks we're buying all of our employees, so.
All the trucks for all
All
over.
the trucks, yeah.
Replacement of the 2009 Ford Escape is still in the DPW capital budget, which was presented to CIPC, and the previous director had put in for a vehicle replacement around the same lines. I did not give you a separate form for this particular vehicle.
No, I mean, what happened, Joe, is last year, because it was the transition year,
Yep.
so Gary had submitted numerous items last year,
Most of which I removed,
including this.
including this. I just
So,
said that, yes.
my point is, the CIPC has not reviewed the truck, because it was submitted under Gary but pulled under you, so there was no review process that took place.
It is a truck type that you have approved before, but for a different use. And I'm
Oh,
being
we've
broad.
bought 250s before,
Yeah.
but we haven't reviewed the purchase of the DPW super vehicle.
So is the truck anywhere on any list?
No.
Actually, it's on our 5-year capital plan. There is a vehicle in the capital plan.
Okay.
And you do have a copy of that.
Yeah,
But you don't have an updated form for this purpose now.
correct, right.
Okay.
So it hasn't gone through the process CIPC goes through for a given capital budget year.
If you have to pull it, you have to pull it. If it's a process issue, pull it. So I have to respect the process, so.
It's been placed.
It'll be pulled once it's been placed?
Yeah, yes, because we have one more meeting on Monday. We could withdraw it. It hasn't been posted.
Correct.
Think of.
If that's the process, you gotta have the process.
Yeah, I mean, the concern is, you know, most years, from what Mike reported, this year might be an exception. Most years, most departments, or some departments, request a lot of things, and the money adds up quick. And the whole point of the CIPC is to make everyone's job easier, to screen these through and prioritize it to make everyone's job easier of what gets placed and what doesn't. So that's the concern. You know, the truck may very well be justified, but what else is out there? Until we go through the process, I guess that's the unknown.
I think that's the only capital vehicle that we purchased this year, correct?
Purchase this, what do you mean purchase?
Well, I don't think DPW has any other capital purchases of this nature. The other one went to the debt exclusion. We haven't purchased any vehicles to date, correct?
Well, in the coming budget cycle, we haven't seen any of the requests for any of the departments yet. That's the concern. So we've already, the capital plan that was approved this past spring, you know, that is what it is. We're in a whole new cycle now with a whole new list of requests coming in from departments, which we're just starting to collect now. So that's where this should fall, is what I'm trying to say, within that list.
So is there a process in the future for something that happens at a special town meeting? Is there a date or time set that
Yeah,
you guys
now,
should have?
now. Yeah.
For
so-
this special town
Not
meeting?
for this special town meeting.
That's what
So
I'm
for this
saying, is there
special,
something-
yep, it should have been submitted in the last capital cycle.
So what you're basically saying is any capital improvements have to be approved in May to be even voted on, possibly to be funded now?
Yeah, because this is the time of year when free cash becomes certified. So even though we recommend it in the springtime, the money may not be there at May at the annual town meeting to actually fund it. It may very well be here in November. And by the time we reach November, that process has already taken place. We have a list of items that we submitted to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee as approved capital items for when the funding becomes available within the fiscal year.
Are there any examples of that going forward at this time?
No, everything that was approved last year, recommended last year, was actually able to be funded at the annual town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's nothing pending. There are a few things pending, prior year recommendations,
Yeah.
that haven't been funded yet. So that's another thing. So maybe some of those should be placed, because there's items that have been approved in past years that haven't been funded yet. One example that comes on the top of my head is the paving of the parking lot at the senior center. That was approved about 3 fiscal years ago, and it hasn't been funded yet. So we have items out there that's gone through CIPC, it's been vetted, it's been recommended, but haven't been funded.
Yeah.
Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have an article that was passed at town meeting a couple years back about paving improvements at the senior center for the parking lot, correct?
11th up.
There's a paving article that we've carried over.
Yeah, that was passed in a past
Okay,
town meeting.
all right.
So that one's passed.
One example, maybe it's one that has been funded, but I can get you the list of items that are approved but not funded,
I
if
think
that
we
helps.
probably need that one.
Yeah.
And I guess this year may be a special case, as you mentioned, that going into the fall, there's not any carryover from the spring
Mhm.
that was recommended and approved, but no funding available. In cases such as this year, would there be a process that mid-year departments could submit to CIPC for consideration at the fall if there is an excess of free cash?
Not for that reason, it's more of an emergency nature,
Okay.
yeah.
So if the vehicle that they're using is failed all inspections,
If there's a danger with the vehicle, that's something that would fall under an emergency situation. Yeah.
It did just fail.
That's the case,
Yeah.
right?
It's
It
pretty
just
much
failed the
there.
safety, right?
But it still has to go through.
It did
the
pass
CIPC.
inspection, but it does have 202,000 miles on it, and it is 10 years old.
It's almost ready for a commercial.
It is, it's good.
What's the lifespan again on CIPC? I
Five.
think it's 5 years. Yeah, we probably want your new truck to last longer than 5 years.
I'm sorry?
We probably want your new truck to last longer than 5 years, of course. Not a cruiser.
It has a current sticker on it.
For how long? Until when? When is the next inspection?
I don't know off the top of my head, I'm sorry. We have a lot of vehicles, I
So,
can't keep on.
just to clarify, if he kept that in with the review with you, but then it didn't get on the spring warrant, then it could have been brought up now?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, all right.
We pulled it from the spring. We did it
We did, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So the question I've got, is it being pulled? Because I've heard conversation, but I haven't heard a decision.
I think what's unfortunate is in a transition year like this, where we had 2 big department heads, right? We had TA and we had DPW transitioning, changing over, plus we had the situation that is water sewer. I think some of the processes that have been so good about moving forward got a little bit lost in translation. So the fact is, we did have the truck onto the May town meeting annual warrant, and we couldn't fund it. But look where the process fell, because it was on a list, it got pulled from a list, it never got considered at the right time. It's an unfortunate position to be in.
I mean, I personally have no problem with it. I just want to know, yes or no, are we going to go through the process or are we not?
Well, it would impact a bunch of items on here then.
Yeah.
The other ones, I mean, the sign being another one
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to get, I was trying to get clarification where we're going to go with this.
Are you asking me?
I don't know who I'm
It's not
asking.
my call.
I guess I'm asking through, because
Well-
the select board changed it, so I'm asking through I guess the select.
I think part of the question too is relative to flexibility, and what we should try to provide to CIPC, with the list that's in front of us based on what's been going on in the past 12 months, and come to any type of consensus, or, do we go back on Monday and say, well, you know what, we're gonna head into a town meeting with 48 articles, and 8 of them, people are gonna stand up and say, nope, it's not ready for prime time, and it's not conducive to a good meeting. So, it's why we're here tonight, absolutely. So it's good to hear this stuff.
I think part of it too, is to look, it's part of that checks and balance system to vet these items. So like some of these capital items, I know we don't have that much backup information on, we haven't had extensive conversation on, so I think the process is really there for a reason to safeguard that.
Yep.
So I mean, I would be inclined to, if there's a way to make it work, to vet these items and go forward in the spring. I would rather see us respect the processes that have been put in place than to make a special example and ignore all processes for this meeting and then kind of recollect. I think it sets bad precedent.
Well, coming back to the issue of emergencies, there's probably one that we'll need to talk about relative to the community center.
Of course,
and
I
the
mean,
walkway.
emergency
So,
exceptions are there for
yeah.
emergency exceptions, but I mean, do I
Yeah.
think a new Ford F-250 is an emergency? I don't know. And the same thing with the sign. Do we need an electronic sign tomorrow, or?
Okay, so let's, we don't need to vote on it tonight, but let's clarify, I think Mike will revisit item AA.
Okay.
And I think what we would wanna ask the CIPC is, if we're talking about the special prior to the annual in May, is this something where some of these, items at that point can be reviewed for free cash that has been certified for FY 2020?
Well, I would think so. By then, we'll be done our whole annual process, and you'll have our recommendations. So as long as these make it to what's submitted to us, absolutely.
I wouldn't we just put them as part of the budget for the next fiscal year?
Well, we're going to look at our line item at the bottom line for remaining usable free cash, changing pretty significantly. So typically, it's the special part of the annual is when we're spending some of that free cash and then carrying the other portion. We could do it either way. We've always done it special annual, but.
No, but all I'm saying is that.
Technically, it's gonna be the
purpose is-
FY 21 capital plan.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But
So-
where the money's coming from is FY 20 certified free cash, or excuse me, FY 19 really certified free cash. Okay. So, I think the board is going to end up taking a second look at AA, which had already been placed, and as well, I think the LED sign in the center. We did have, for the LED sign, the company, that came out once already to the town. We're going to come to the fall town meeting to show residents what that sign looked like. I'm not sure if that would be necessary at this point if we're not gonna be talking about it.
Could we do that as an introduction? Because there was a lot of discussion in our
Not at
meeting
the
about
fall
that,
town.
whether we think that's something that we wanna spend that much money on.
Yeah.
Yeah, do that as a public hearing.
Yeah, as an
Don't-
introduce it.
Don't mix it with the warrants. I mean, the
like that.
meetings go long enough that we don't really need dog and pony shows too much with this unless it's to a warrant.
Okay.
But then, and then it
That's
can
my
be
opinion.
discussed at the May meeting, because at least
Yeah.
it will have been introduced.
And have public
In their
hearings
brain.
and whatnot at that point, but, dog and pony show for, if there's not a warrant, it just mucks up the works.
Okay. Does anybody want to talk about AB, the feasibility design study?
What's that, is that for the community building?
Seniors.
Senior center?
Yeah, to build a new senior center.
So we're on,
But we
that's
haven't
AB.
considered, it hasn't made the,
What's gonna be done with the old senior center?
I think, Mike, we went with the highest number.
Correct.
So, I mean,
The number of affairs says typically between 25, 35,000.
So this is definitely,
We've had the studies before. We've done it for the eligibility study.
so this is definitely one of the big reasons to have everybody here tonight, which is the senior center. I mean, as you know, Becky talks about it all the time, we are finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the debt load that we're carrying. Dan's here tonight, he can speak to that as well, and obviously Becky provided our pulled out debt schedule. One of the projects that we've all talked about a long time is sort of pie in the sky, because we knew we couldn't handle it up until 2021, was a senior center. I think there's general consensus that the building is unsuitable for the use that it's being used for, the kitchen, the heating, the acoustics. I think the list is long and illustrious. A couple of the nice things about a project like this is that it's a manageable size project, unlike some of the others that are going to be much larger. Also, that we've got some wonderful best practices. We have 2 neighboring communities that have recently gone through senior center construction, which anybody could go out and see, that being Sterling and West Boylston, and I believe, and Nancy's going to give better information than me, they've been very willing to be cooperative with us and to share their information.
Share their information and plans, yeah.
This is a very preliminary step. The money would not have to be spent right away. Obviously, there are still questions about where to place this. That is part of the feasibility portion of this study, as well as the design. And I think, yeah, Nancy, I know you've had a lot of things you saw that you loved and things that you didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's, what's recommended by Executive Office of Elder Affairs in particular is to form a committee, which we have. It hasn't officially met yet, but is to go to comparable sized towns and see what they have to offer, because that makes sense, same number of people, what they have to offer, what works, what doesn't work, to get an idea to start. And, I mean, the need for services has definitely increased. We have, I don't know the exact number now, I'd have to check again, but over 1,600 plus the new 2020 census is gonna be done. So those numbers, I'm sure we'll see an increase in. And just services, I mean, we're short on housing, we have a huge increase in people who are suffering from dementia and just living longer, so needing more, and more importantly, or just as important, as people approach that age. It's not just people who, there's kind of this stigma that people go by, they're not old enough to be there, but really, a lot of this needs to start 50, 55 and up, so that people can age in place in a healthy way. So there'd be so much more we could offer with a suitable center. And you see the numbers statistically, you put up a suitable center like that, new or remodeled, whatever you choose, but all of a sudden your numbers increase very rapidly. Because, people see what's out there and then they participate, and you can offer more programs. So, and more resources, because that's a big thing too. All of a sudden, we kind of wait until we get into a crisis mode. People need help, assistance, what do? They retire, the money's not coming in as much, or illnesses come into place, and we'd like to be prepared for that to help people, instead of just waiting until the last minute and trying to force everybody into nursing homes or assisted livings that really aren't always suitable. Assisted livings tend to be very expensive, nursing homes too, but they're not, especially in my opinion, a proper way to age. There's a lot more available for people. We don't just have to, not to put any of those places down, we don't just have to sit around and exist. There's so much more, and if we're prepared for it, I think it's a good thing.
Secretary Chen from the Executive Office of Elders Affairs is also planning to visit our existing senior center within the next month and a half. We're currently coordinating that with my office to say, this really shouldn't be here, this is working well, this is where you can improve. So that is in the works as well.
Are there grants available to help us with that once we make some decisions?
I'm sorry.
Are there grants for this kind of thing once we make a decision on what we're gonna do? I
Yes.
assume that we would have money.
And the other thing we're trying to, I don't know if any of you have heard, I think Massachusetts was one of the top 4 states to accept age/dementia-friendly communities. And then once the state adopts that, community within the state, we already have over 160 communities within the state that do that. So what happens is Alzheimer's Association and other associations come in and train, first responders, people in restaurants, people in banks, people that work in a municipality, so that everybody kind of understands and learns what not only dementia friendly is, but aging in place, and that opens us up to a whole lot more as far as that.
I just thought there was just recently, one of the Brookfields became the first Central Mass, or worked with CMRPC to become age dementia friendly community.
One of them I don't know if they were the first, but I know
Okay.
Lunenburg is in process of doing it, a lot of towns. I don't know who in Central Mass, I'd have to find out.
A lot of the
Gardner.
towns east of here about that
Yeah,
process.
but I just
Central
remember
Mass,
seeing
yeah.
a big.
Yeah, Gardner received their designation 2 years ago as well.
That would be great.
Wow, good.
I just want to make a comment that when you look at something like this, there was an attempt to form a building committee to look at all the issues in the town for what we needed. I understand Joe's in charge of it, but I still think when you're, instead of dealing with one building at a time, a committee start to oversee and look at the long-range implications of all the buildings out there, not just having one. Now, Joe could head the committee, but I still think that many minds are better than one. I still believe that. So I think looking at this gives impetus for moving forward to have the town establish some type of committee like that looks at everything, not just one at a time. You could have that, but maybe there's a building we could combine it with, so to speak, that fulfills more function at less cost. I don't know, I'm just thinking that's an idea for a committee.
I think the challenge here is that a feasibility study, I think, implies that when you get something back, you're ready to roll on it. That the town has a feeling that, we need this information, we want to gather this information because we're going to take next steps. And the concern is that I've heard in other meetings where there's money being spent in looking at planning for something in community center. And the question is, can we do both? And I think the answer is no. So where's the focus going to be? Do we want to spend $35,000 and truly move forward on the senior center, which no one's going to argue there's a need for? Or are we going to spend money and focus and move forward on the community hall? There's a need for both. To Harry's point, what's the priority? Let's pick the priority and let's spend our money there, whatever that priority ends up being. But I don't know how we can justify spending $35,000 if we don't know that we're ready to move forward on a project that comes as a result of what this study tells us.
And this, you're saying that this needed to go through CIPC?
I'm not even, CIPC is totally out of this at this point.
Right.
I'm struggling spending $35,000 if, as a town, we're not prepared to actually move forward with the next steps after this $35,000 is spent, knowing that there's already a lot of time and resources and money being spent on community hall. We can't do them both at the same time. So which one are we gonna do?
Yeah, so that's fair. I know I have somebody out here.
I was just gonna say, for this type of a project, this type of study wouldn't be the, once it's done, let's go. It'd be similar to what we just did last year with the community hall project, where now, if we appropriate the money, now we're ready, let's go.
But if we're not ready, Mike, we're spending $35,000, we're gonna let 5-10 years go by, and frankly, what we spent today is gonna be useless 10 years from now.
Why would it have to be 5 to 10 years? Why couldn't we start planning?
I just
for
wrote
the-
a number,
Oh,
Nancy.
but-
It's whatever the time frame is.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, that we don't have enough to do two giant projects, but at the same time, if we knew how to plan, and this would give us an idea how to plan, and we may not have to spend 35, it could come in a lot less than that, especially if we utilize some of the other towns around us. But then it might say, okay, we wanna plan this way, and we could start applying for some of those grants.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, Joe.
Yeah.
They're not gonna be able to look at us as far as grant applications go until they
Well,
know
if you can,
that we-
if you think you can look people in the eye and justify $35,000 for that purpose, then great. I just don't see us undertaking two major capital buildings in a short time frame.
I don't disagree. I think those are two separate conversations too, or at least part of a different, maybe parallel conversation, because we have the community hall study coming up as well on the list. So is it okay to put a pin in that just for a second? Because that is a big one as well. I don't disagree with your point of how much can you do all at once. Relative to the rest of these sort of big ticket items on page 6, did anybody want any further explanations? Really the computer systems?
That was curiosity for me. What exactly were we getting for $25,000? Because as of January 15th, Windows 7 no longer is a safe system on the planet. So is that what we're getting for $25,000?
So this started as an $800 warrant article.
I figured that was going to change when I heard about it.
I contacted CM Geeks and said, how many computers do we have that are not on Windows 10 and that are still on Windows 7? Because I didn't know we had one until we found out that the GIS didn't work on Joe's computer.
It works a little bit.
He sent me the spreadsheet that you have in your packets, and we found out that we have 20 computers that are not on Windows 10. These computers were purchased between 4 to 5 years ago. You should be rotating your computers every 3 to 4. And per Paul McKenzie at CM Geeks, would not be fully compatible if we updated them to Windows 10. So not only do we need the upgrading license, but we need a new machine with it. It's $1,200, $1,000 to $1,200 is the range, depending on the computer. We need, that's fully softwared with the operating system, plus all the software that we need to run our programs. For instance, our Vadar software that we use to do our accounting, treasure collecting, and assessing programs so that they can all talk to each other, need Microsoft Access in the background, so it's a higher Office package there. That's just a piece of it too, but these are just bits and pieces that help, that could make it fluctuate from that $1,000 to that $1,200. And that is how we ended up there. Also, speaking to Paul, we currently have 4 encrypted backups of the entire system, which is why Paul said, while end of life for Windows 7 is going to be January 14th, we should be fine until June 14th because of the amount of steps that we've taken behind the scenes with Director Moriarty, myself, and Paul to just make sure we have everything as safe and secure as we can.
I just want to throw it, mainly because I'm an engineer and working with IT. That's the main function, and there's somebody sitting that I'm married to who's went through being hacked from a company. And the main attack now is towns, municipalities, and businesses. So I'd rather spend the money and be safe. And not like the last time we went through when I was on my board and had Seth's not here, a fire chief buy our hardware. I don't want to go through that again.
I'm using my Datasmith pen as we speak.
All right, I'm fine with that.
How many municipalities and state offices didn't plan for this and are going through the same process right now?
This is almost like the year 2000 stuff. When everybody spent a lot of money to get updated.
I mean, Leominster just paid the ransom on their attack because it was cheaper than actually going in and fixing it.
So that's why I didn't want to wait till June. Get the hardware, get it in on this warrant, and get the software and get updated. It's the last thing we wanted to be done. It's been brought to our knees.
Is this through the state contract, Mike, or is this?
Yep.
We did a better price than what we were quoted for.
Yes.
That's what I was going to ask too. We're using state-sourced computers like Dell or whoever.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Through our IT contractor. So Paul will be the one who actually goes through, who knows our IT needs, and say, this is the computer we need for that, through those contractors.
As long as we're not going to Tiger Direct again.
Correct.
Really, correct. I want to go through that again. I'm dead serious.
My goal, my father works for Gardner's IT department, so I checked with both his director as well as some other IT directors who I've known through just municipal networks. The process is to make a schedule that you rotate when you're purchasing your new equipment, that way you don't have a $25,000 hit at once every 3 to 4 years. So I am in the process of now making that for our machines, so we won't have to be here again in 4 years.
That was actually brought up with our previous IT person.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why it's been years now and why our current tech people, I know I personally expended, I've talked to you about this, for 3 new computers in our office at the end of this fiscal year. So I don't know why it didn't come up even 6 months ago, not from you, but from them.
Yeah, I brought this up to them as a, how did we get here type conversation, and was told the conversation was really, we don't have the money to upgrade it right now. And so they didn't, and that's how we got here. I don't understand, I don't know if that's the case, I just started in January, and CM Geek started a year before that. But that was what I was told. It was a, we don't have the money right now, let's take care of that later.
All right, we're at 9:45. I'm gonna keep going forward. So AE again, unless people have questions, we'll go to the next page. This was an 8-month-old bid, still good, from the Collins Center, to assist the town in drafting a charter, $20,000. And then the final one, the 18468 for the Walker at the community center. If there's no comments, all right, I'm gonna keep going.
Did the walkway go through CIPC?
No, we had a conversation at the meeting though, and I mean, it sounds like this is a great candidate for the emergency compliance type of argument.
Okay.
So it should come through CIPC, and this is the type of one that we can certainly care for before the special.
Push along,
Yeah.
yeah, but still go through you guys so that it goes through the process.
I think the issue is that it's not, that it's an emergency, that's a new emergency, right? It's something that's been.
Yeah, so I just want to remind, and I don't know where it needs to go, we talked about it with Mike, but we're having all these conversations about capital needs, and according to Mike, not one, we have a deadline of, I think, November 1st.
Correct.
For all capital requests to be submitted. I don't think one has been submitted yet. Yet here we are talking about a bunch of capital requests, so somehow we can push this along and get this list to us, that way they can be considered, but if we don't see them, we can't consider them.
All right, page 7 is a long list of things that are actually far more typical in scope and need for our special town meetings. I'm gonna run through them quick. If there's any questions, just stop me. $15,000 for the vision appraisal software upgrade, 15 for legal for Becky Tuttle's office for foreclosures and tax title, etc. We've got 2 different separate articles for plotter printer scanners at $78.97 each. That's for 2 different locations so that the voters can make a choice as to whether or not one or both need them. Yes.
That was a discussion that we came up, we spent a lot of time, and I think our final decision, as at this moment in time anyway, was, did we really need 2?
That's our question.
Yep.
You already have one in the fire department as well. And is it something that we can put off for another year for the second one and start rotating, as we talked about now with computers? No, that was another thought.
So
It's
we
an option.
reconsider one?
Yeah, it's an option.
Let me ask a question with that. The tough thing we had when we had our office over here is nothing was networked, so we couldn't print anything. We couldn't have our admin print anything. Has that been moved along any farther so we can come into the 21st century?
We're working on it.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. I'm just,
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's 2. One is for the annex building, which for our planner and planning boards.
And
especially.
building.
And,
Yeah, that was DPW.
and the other one was down at DPW, so I think that's why there were 2, but I understand.
But there is currently one already, even though it's old, in one of those.
In the fire
nope,
station.
that's fire station. There's no
It's at the
access to
fire
anybody.
station, okay.
And they can't virtually print, so they need to take whatever file
Right.
over there to print.
But then there was discussion on that too, of the
it's
networking.
and stuff.
Networking.
Yeah.
So that's just clarification.
It's just a lot of money for the amount of times that it would actually be used, especially if we're working on networking, was our.
But
what
this,
I think it would be used plenty. It's
yes, now it would.
when it would,
Can I ask a question? Are they plotter
You guys.
scanners?
yeah,
So you're getting rid of paper?
yeah.
That's the key.
That's
You'll
the
be
reason.
scanning,
Yes.
you'll be
All right.
scanning and stuff to
So-
PDFs.
that there's more to it than just making more, big pictures. You're shrinking your stock of paper. Just wanna
Tremendous.
call
We're
that
trying to
out.
open up, I know he's trying to look at space that we have up above with all the storage, all the old rolls that you guys have.
Yes,
for
exactly.
We need to get that scanned in and
Yep.
I think one of the big things that this reflects is the professionalizing of a couple of the offices and having a full-time planner now. Probably having that plotter printer scanner for Dave in the main building is gonna be a huge benefit. If we only put one on and it's gonna be between Dave and Joe, we'll have to make that decision. But for the finance committee to consider, that's probably where it was coming from. And I had suggested just combining them into purchasing two, and then somebody said, well, no, let's give the residents a chance to say, nope, you need, just take one, and then we'll cancel the other. Okay. You've got a few in a row here, starting with AK that are coming from the Department of Public Works. That is $57.50 for the stump grinder, $5,000 for a tree farm initial purchase, $5,000 for some demolition and cleanup of properties the town has taken through tax title. On the top of the next page, $2,500 for the pool pump house roof. These have been placed.
If I may?
Yeah.
So for the AL, the purchase of trees, Joe and I spoke to come up with a plan for how that would go, and he can speak to that more. A certain percentage of the trees would be reserved for those that request them. Those would be the ones that we would keep somewhere as the farm, quote unquote. The rest would be used to replace trees in areas where we've had to go cut trees down to help replace the stock that we have. In some areas of town, just because that's received some questions before. AM, in your binders, if you turn to that section, I gave you pictures of the properties that are at issue. These are a major safety concern for us. They are in the cool sandy beach area. One is a garage shed type area that you can barely see because it's on the other side of the trees. Neither structure has a full roof on it. And the other one is a structure that was condemned by the building department. You have a copy of the condemnation letter that was sealed. The door had been kicked in. It's vandalized on the inside. It's also sitting over a brook on stilts. It's a safety concern for us and a liability issue for the town should anything happen in those properties, as we own the property outright through tax title. If we took it through land court, it's under full ownership of the town.
When are they gonna be auctioned?
They've been auctioned, they've been put up for auction.
They're not
with no bids.
selling?
Yeah, they're not selling. This is just to clear the safety issue, clean the land, and maybe that'll make a bite.
any advantage of using this with the fire department for test burns?
We thought of it, it's too close, it's too close to the other ones there. We honestly thought of it.
Well, if they catch, that solves all the problems, right?
If you turn to the map that's immediately before those pictures, the area that's shaded pink is owned by the town. In that corner where it looks like there's some letters near the, some writing next to the letter F, that's where Becky wrote shed, that's the first picture. The area shaded blue is, we also own that outright. That's the taller house structure that's on stilts above a brook. So that, if you're looking for where it is, Pine Way was never built out to the section that we own, but it's there on the map.
We had a great time on field trip.
We have a nuisance property working group of department heads who took a just walking tour of the entire neighborhood, which is the first time any of us saw these properties in person, aside from our police and fire chief who didn't know that we owned them.
Maybe even earlier than that. 30s, 20s and 30s.
Any other questions?
Something that you think you want to resell it? If you took it down and tried to resell it?
We talked about this, but the lot, if you take the structure off, right, the lot's so small that you're gonna get a building permit for it.
No.
So, who's gonna buy it?
I mean, it is 3 lots together too. At this point, my
There's a
concern.
brook in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Both of the lots, frankly, were very wet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a wet area down there anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's no
just,
good for a tree farm, is it?
No.
Two.
I think it's something that maybe the town ought to just hold on to.
My concern at this point isn't so much what happens after we tear the structures down
worried
as
about
it
the
is getting
safety.
rid of the liability issue that we currently have should someone be injured there or set them on
True.
fire because there's a new
that's all.
fire stove that's in
This
there.
point
that
is just
wasn't
to get
in
rid
there.
of that structure.
Right?
Yeah.
We're doing our due diligence.
Get rid of the structure and then either hang on to the land for future or, with the Land Conservancy or something like that, especially with the wetlands.
So I'm looking
I knew
here.
you were gonna get that question.
Of course I was.
We talked about this, right?
Of course. So, and we talked about it as well on Monday. I mean, as we know, we've got about 15 years where recreation has been fully removed from under the levy. That has included over time, you know, just as our finances are looking worse and worse, having a recreation revolving fund take on the capital structure improvements. So they've done the liner of the pool, pretty good expense, $12,000, $15,000. They put in the ADA compliant chair. They have done improvements to structures owned by the town. Now, are they the agency that was supposed to be running programming? Absolutely. Are they running the pool for us? Yes. But if we were contracting with a private agency to run the pool, they would not be paying for the capital improvement. At some point, I know Karen's, look, she'd give me the look. At some
I'm
point,
sorry,
the
but
town's
you know,
gonna
the
have to-
fact is that they get the benefit from that money. It does not go to the taxpayers. They get that benefit. The taxpayers do not see any of that money. It's in a revolving fund. They do not see it. So I'm always looking at the other side of things, which is that $2,500 should be, that they need that roof. We could tear that down and we'd be fine. We don't need that pump house. The town doesn't need the pump house. The recreation needs it to keep the pool open.
The town owns the pool
It owns the pool, but we don't get any benefit from it.
because we chose that.
I agree, but that's the thing, that's the revolving fund, and do they have enough money to spend the $2,500?
So we don't have Karina here tonight, we know her programs are running well, but it is still revolving and it's not supposed to be a money maker. I'll stand by this, I personally don't think that a recreation department as it stands should be funding anything other than a rotation of, we are running programs. They are running that pool for us, that does not mean they own any of those structures. They've done an enormous amount for us, probably if we total it up, it's somewhere in the $40,000 or $50,000. I would argue that probably at some point soon, it might be time for the town to look again at pulling recreation partly back under the levy, as most healthy towns have, whether that's her salary, part of her salary. In some other towns, they are actually having to supplement pool because it's not typically a money maker, as we know.
Can I ask, does anyone know, the rec programming that goes on there, are there ever waivers that are issued to families that maybe can't afford
Yes.
some of the programming?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's something where if they have less money because they have to spend it on the roof, then maybe less of those kids get to participate in the programming. I mean, that's also a concern too, so.
As an example of that, when I had applied for that Attorney General's Office grant for summer youth programs over the summer, and we were able to get one of our staff members funded through that. The equivalent amount was used to do the eligible, income eligible reduced prices. If I may, Sheila, just going back to AM, just because this has been a point of confusion with other people we've talked about, if you do look at that map, the things in yellow are not associated with this item. The yellow items are things that we're currently in land court with, for tax title purposes. The green we currently have a payment plan for. The structure itself is at the corner of Nicholas and Helen, and then the entirety of the blue is the larger house. So that's just to clarify on the map there, because that's some confusion that's been brought to my office before. I meant to say that before. Thanks.
All right, I'm back on page 8, AO, we have 1598 for the Council on Aging for some sturdier tables and chairs. That has been placed. And then I'm jumping, so here's our next big one. This has not yet been placed by the select board, there were also questions. That's the feasibility design, 58.7 for renovations to the community hall building. What else? Is there a, what I want to note here, and we'll start the conversation because Joe brought it up, is one of the things that's driving this is the time frame that we are being given to some extent by the state relative to our regional dispatch. Regional dispatch is right now in a holding pattern. They cannot expand any further in the location that they are in. Because of where so much of the equipment is, it has been found, Mike Moriarty has looked into this quite extensively, that the annex is actually a wonderful next location. Most likely, it is the final location prior to what we would think would happen when we look at what the state is doing relative to regional dispatch, which is they're kind of seeing where things coalesce, to have dispatch become a district. At that point, it will no longer belong to the town of Rutland and most likely would build its own building elsewhere. So this is probably its last Rutland location. This is just a guess of mine. That being said, there is a priority to move everyone who's in there now out of the annex and into somewhere. And knowing that we've been sitting with a building, i.e. the community hall, that has been sub-optimally able to be used because of ADA issues, has engendered the discussions of what we can do to it in the interim, prior to, Joe, I think what you were alluding to, which is the big project that we need to do at some point to make it useful enough to allow for the town agencies to move into it and allow rec to continue to expand. As the first regional dispatch in the state, I'll just put it out there, it's a priority of mine that we keep regional dispatch. It's a bit of a competition. We've got Holden out there, we've got state police, we're looking at what's happening with the agencies that are growing versus the agencies that are closing down. And most municipalities are starting to see some combinations of services. It's one of those things that we just have to deal with. So that's what brought that up. Now, to Joe's point about how much we can handle at once, it's a fair question, and it's why this didn't get placed quite yet, because we need to kind of figure out among all of us what we can handle. Look at Tim. Tim's holding his hand up.
My tough part with this is everybody keeps going back to using I'll call it the old library, the annex, for the expansion. Two things, again, this is my engineering side. Has anybody looked at the second floor addition to the fire station? Secondly, being a controls engineer, how does anybody justify using that building that's brick to bring in computers, wires, all the other infrastructure? I've seen no feasibility study on that, and I'm still curious of how that's going to happen, because we've got to get it done in a year or two, if I'm not mistaken, for this money that's out there. So I'm confused. We're wanting to spend money on the town hall, and we don't even have any feasibility or study. Can we use that annex building for the expansion?
Fair question.
So State 911 came out 2 years ago. It was either a year and a half or 2 years ago. They toured the town to see where the best place to go. They looked at a couple options. They flat out said that they will not cover a penny of any new construction or a piece of a new construction. So if we were to build a satellite fire station, they wouldn't cover the portion the dispatch would go into there.
Well, I was thinking second floor in the existing fire station.
Yeah, so that was another option that they looked at there. They said that was not ideal for their plans. I'd have to see the exact reasoning why, but those are listed. Mike does have those, as well as the full design of the annex. If they were to move in there, the layout, design, walls, what wires need to go in there, there's a full plan for the renovations that they'll be doing.
Did we pay for that?
Building. No, the state did.
They paid for it, and they pay for the renovations, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they said the only place in town that they would pay full soup to nut for every penny of the renovations needed would be the annex building.
Wow.
So that has been our driver, if that helps to clarify things.
I don't think that's ever been passed on to us in one of our rooms.
Yes,
That'd be
since
nice.
the number of places
I've heard
current
it. It's-
employees,
I'd
would they
still
kick
say
in
kick 'em out.
anything to help that other building? No.
No.
Town hall?
They will not.
Only dispatch related.
Okay, that makes me, I hadn't heard that, so it's good.
The money that was referred to is we receive $100,000 in grant funding from State 911 for their development program that we are only eligible for if we are able to expand. We currently do not have the capability of expanding, as we are at maximum capacity for the room that our dispatchers sit in. We are not allowed to add any more. Warren was the last one that was able to fit. And then the other concerns are with the addition of our 3 fire staff that we are able to hire through the SAFER grant. Should the match pass at town meeting, we need an extra bunk room. The current plan for that Chief Knight put in place, since he is the one who's in charge of the public safety building as a strong chief, is Director Moriarty's office is moving into the police department break room. The police will now be using the fire department big room as their break, lunchroom, and kitchen. And Director Moriarty's office will become the third bunk room for that additional fire staff. Not ideal, but they need to do something in the interim before dispatch moves out, and that was the next, not open and empty room, but the next room available to use, that we had another one in that building for them.
So I think a little bit of this is all just the growth the town has seen over the past number of years and hasn't had the funding to keep up with some of the, we've been bare bones for so long, has finally kind of caught up as we're expanding staff across the town. And so now we're kind of hitting that building capacity point of the town needs more staff, whether it's public safety staff or whatnot, and we don't have the space to do that.
The, one of the main, I guess, first steps that they looked at the annex to is that State 911 did pitch in a little bit when the annex was connected with fiber optic cable to the public safety building. So the annex is actually on the same network as the public safety building because of that. I did include the plans that the architect, not the drawings that the architect drew, that will be going before the select board for approval in your packets. The main part of the cost is going to be the elevator. They had originally intended to put what's called a LULA, limited use, limited access elevator into the building, where we're looking to expand later on down the line in a larger project. The moment we did that, that elevator would go out of compliance. So this is a full service elevator that's attached to it, and then temporary walls in the auditorium level. That way, when we do the full renovations, we can be able to regain that space there.
Let me ask through the chair one other important question. Actually, two. I'll go with two. Has anybody with a building that old done any abatement view of asbestos, of anything like that? Has that been done?
In terms of seeing what's there?
Seeing
Or
if there's
seeing
any
how much is-
asbestos, because that
Oh, we know
basement
there's
area-
asbestos.
Well,
Yeah.
the abatement cost alone is gonna run you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my concern, we talked about this on Monday,
Yeah.
is there's so many unknowns with that building that putting the money forward through a study, to kind of echo Joe's point, is, you know, we might have something come back and we might not be able to do anything with it. The elevator itself could cost upwards of $1 million to put a full-service elevator in that facility. If you have a building that age, you're gonna run into environmental concerns. Having worked with these buildings in other communities, there's gonna be lead, there's gonna be asbestos, there's underground issues. I would like to see, before we put this forward and spend almost $60,000 on it, be presented with options. I mean, there might be other options, and I think part of that needs to be included in a more comprehensive plan for all of our buildings.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about shifting the senior center, we're talking about rec expanding, we're gonna have public safety needs, and then we have, like Leah just mentioned, more employees coming in. We just need something more comprehensive, and we need to not piecemeal this, it needs to be done right.
Amen.
I,
And where are you gonna put the cars too, and the more people come in, you're
We're gonna park them on
Parking.
your farm, we're just gonna drive down there, and we're gonna bus.
you're gonna move the whole town hall over to Overlook.
I spoke to the architect today based off the concerns of the select board that they expressed at the meeting on Monday about what would it be if we were to raise the building and build new from scratch, foundation up? What would it be if we were to build a new building and repurpose the existing building and things of that nature? All the questions that were asked at the select board meeting. On Monday, the architect said that's gonna take a couple days. It wasn't something he was able to answer in a
I'd
couple
rather
hours.
have him take,
I'd have him take a
I'm surprised
month
he
or
get
a
something in a
year.
couple days, so that concerns me a little
Well,
bit.
it's
but-
the price estimate for that he
Yes.
could get in a couple of days, not the actual work.
So again, I think that's what, we gotta pick a project and go
Yeah,
with the
legitimate
project.
question.
You know, I don't see how we can, one way or another, if we do both of these feasibility studies, one is gonna be backburnered. Then we're gonna be back in several years, whatever that time frame is, looking at it all over again. So I say we gotta somehow, a priority has to be chosen and focus on that priority, because we can't build two at once. We
Joe,
can't renovate two
to
at once.
ask you a question though, do you think we've even done enough due diligence to where we can justify moving forward with the study at this point?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what you've done. I don't know what's happened. I know what was done 5 years ago, but I don't know what's done of late. So I can't answer that question, Mitch, but I do think we have to pick a focus and move on that focus.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have already had done, we were talking about in our finance committee meeting, was we'd actually had plans the town had paid for the annex and the old town hall, which
Sure.
was like 25,000, 30,000.
That was done a long, long time ago. Yep.
So I mean, we've spent money that we haven't really.
But that's my point.
That's the fear.
We're about to do it again.
That's why I brought it up. That's why I'm
Absolutely.
saying
That's what I'm trying to prevent.
But here's the flip side of that, and this is the one that I'll never get over. We threw $750,000 at a building that we are now looking at, a hole in the ground, when somebody said, we haven't done our due diligence, and it was a fair point, and we had an architect come in and give us a number that, in retrospect, to finish that project was actually very manageable. And instead of going the distance, finishing out that project, we all threw up our hands, went into a town meeting and said, forget it. I'd rather use a different word because it's after 10 o'clock, but forget it. And we knocked it down. And we lost every bit of work that we had done. I will say, you know, Joe, I totally get your point. I think in my head, the renovation that we need to Community Hall is a sort of first do no harm. Can we just get people in there using it to its fullest without hampering a future, much larger project? Now, Mitch's point was, what if it's not ever gonna be a larger project? And that's a fair question to ask. It might be part of a master plan discussion, because there might be residents who will say, yep, you know what, we think it should be up in the Heights.
But the problem is, you're gonna run into, once you get into a certain level of renovation, and there's a former fire chief sitting right here, you're looking at things like sprinkling in that building, you're gonna do the elevator. I mean, so you're gonna put so much money into a renovation to buy time, that it's not gonna be worth it to replace it when you wanna replace it, because you put so much money into renovating.
I think
So you gotta pick a project and do the project the way you want that project to be, not as a stopgap.
And I think to piggyback off of the chair's point, is that phasing these projects in buildings like this can be very difficult and very complicated. And the fear is always, if you sprinkler something, or if you put in the wrong elevator, and then you do additional renovations that trigger some other compliance that you're no longer into, you're just adding and compounding cost. I think that is the fear with some of what we've seen with some of these buildings, is I personally don't feel that we have enough to really jump into this project yet. I just don't.
So can I ask a question for this room, because we rarely get together? One of the things that seems to me is sort of the linchpin of where this will head, if not tonight and if not November, then, you know, coming up soon, is, does this town want to keep Community Hall where it is? And keep the building, which is at this point, what did we say, 85 years old?
1935.
I think a lot of that's gonna depend though on the options we can present to people in terms of cost.
Well, I
right?
don't know. Some towns are going to preserve at the expense of it. Some towns won't, and I don't know. Like, you know?
But what's
Can I
the
ask a
expense?
question? Have any commercial enterprises come to us looking for perhaps part of that use of that area or that building?
Hasn't been advertised.
Never been marketed as
No, I mean,
But that doesn't stop big companies from coming to say.
Well, no, but
you
I
know.
don't think they usually approach to see, can we buy a town hall?
I don't know, I was thinking about the landmark building in Holden, nobody,
You know,
is
so
that
would-
something we would maybe wanna look at? I mean, it's,
In
we
my
need
opinion,
commerce and it's in the middle of town.
There's no electricity, the wiring stinks, there's no, I mean, the downstairs area, like they were talking, putting the planning board there, how could we even operate down there in that lower facility? I mean, I'm looking at is there asbestos? I'm not being down there with asbestos, I'm sorry, life's
And
too
the
important to
heater
me.
is a problem for the cable, because cable makes you turn it off. So if you have any, because it makes too much noise, so if you have a meeting when it's chilly, you have to wear your coat. We've had several finance committee meetings where they've turned that off because it makes too much noise.
I guess I look at it a little bit, and maybe this is a little bit to Joe's point, as far as if we do a sizable renovation to get it to a point that we can get people in there to look at the annex, I kind of see it, and continue with the senior center, that this town is hurting for indoor meeting space. It's hurting for rehearsal space for community activities. It's hurting for meeting space for all of our boards and commissions. I feel like that, even if that renovation was just done as kind of in a stop, and then in a few years, it was looked at, oh, maybe we rebuild community hall somewhere else, or we decide to go through with that renovation.
You're gonna be paying for it then, though.
Yeah, that's a
You're
lot.
still gonna be paying for the renovation and knocking it down and rebuilding something
No, I
else that
don't think
doesn't
we
make
would knock it
sense.
down. I'm saying that I think that the town is in desperate need of additional indoor space.
Agreed, so let's focus on it and build it right. Get it done, build it right to what we need for the
Yeah.
long term, because we're gonna be
Yes.
borrowing for it for 20 years at least.
Yeah.
Get it done right, and move forward. Move on to the next project after that.
Okay, so let's revisit that for a second. If we're gonna put a pin in this project where we will no longer focus, at least for now, on making the community hall more usable because of the original goal, which was to empty the annex, where does everybody go from the annex? Because that is still a question. Where does
When do
everybody
they
go?
have to be out?
2 years, you said?
All right, so what about,
Year and a half.
instead of using almost $100,000 for 2 studies, we get this committee that Harry suggested together. Maybe you plan on the heights, and you actually then spend some money with an architect to draw what we envision and present that to the town as a goal.
Maybe, but it doesn't help the rec issue. It doesn't help the timing
Well,
for.
you got, what, you got.
Oh, sorry, for
Yeah, we know
regional
what you talked
dispatch.
about.
It
Oh,
does
okay,
not
that
help
one.
the timing for regional dispatch.
Well, the alternate is, which schools have seen for a lot of time, and Norma taught in this, I guess, you can put up temporary modules to be able to use to get over the hump.
Yeah, I really think we're short-sighted. I understand there's a desire to expand rec, but to rush something this big to this magnitude for that reason, I think is a little bit short-sighted. I think we gotta be looking long-term for the money that's gonna be expended and to do it right and what our needs are. We're gonna look beyond just rec and the needs of rec. We're gonna look at what we need as a community hall.
Joe, that's my point. If we've gotta get that, if that money's out there and we gotta get a hand on it, and now I feel better that the state's gonna pay for that building renovation, move forward, and if you gotta do modular for 4 or 5 years while you're getting this plan put together, then get it done and go that route. And I'm fully behind doing it once and doing it once right.
That's a good.
I don't think you rush into it, you know, you make that building and 3 years later, you're like, man, this thing's not working out right.
Yeah.
And you put all that money in it. I just don't think it's right.
I just don't wanna see us do the fire station again. We built this beautiful thing, and if you were up there at the top floor, it's basically, that could have been done magnificently for about an extra $1 million when you built the place.
Yes.
It never got done. I don't wanna see the town make that same mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, we nickel and
Okay,
dimed that project.
you nickel dimed it.
Well, when you say with the extra money, it wasn't voted. The
Right.
townspeople only gave us X amount of
Oh,
dollars.
that's right.
Right.
Maybe we didn't approach it right at the time, I don't know, but the point is.
I do know, and it was approached as best we could.
Yeah.
And we had
Well, I'm
proposed,
not throwing.
no, we had proposed a bigger building that was voted down. So we went back to what we had, what we could
But why
propose.
did, you built the building, but then why didn't the top get finished?
It wasn't designed to be finished.
Really?
Could you consider doing a feasibility study for town hall and senior center as a one building, one facility?
That was another thing.
Yeah, that could be something.
I mean, this is where the architect comes into play.
Right, so then you're doing the study for both purposes, and it's one study, and then they find the best location.
I think as far as the grants that we were seeing, I'm sure Mike
Oh,
can speak
would
to
that
this
limit
more.
it?
No,
Well,
it would
they would,
expand.
Oh, that expanded?
Oh.
Oh, that's the
Well, you asked if, if we minded if that building basically wasn't there anymore. Personally, I drive around to a lot of little towns. You go to West Boylston, you go to, these places are putting up their own, they are not working out of their old buildings anymore.
Right.
They're putting up absolutely beautiful facilities.
The building
Shows
isn't
progress.
designated historically significant
No,
or
so
anything like
as
that.
far as I'm concerned, it's what works for the town of Rutland.
I think the location is desirable, the
Yeah.
building is
Undesirable.
Right.
all right.
It's a money pit, I think it would become.
If this was the only reason to have this meeting, and it was till 10:18, I think this was a great conversation. My goal is 10:30. Anybody else? Here we go. 6.2.
So let me go back, Sheila, I apologize, the 58,000,
It
since
has-
that hasn't been placed,
hasn't been placed.
is that in this group, is that as a discussion point that it doesn't sound like it needs to be placed?
Yeah, it doesn't
Am I
sound-
hearing that?
Doesn't sound like it's ready for prime time.
Or would it, and
Made the
this is
decision.
to not
X.
extend this conversation, but would it be worth going back to see if we could do a joint feasibility, look at a what the feasibility
For the
study-
Maytown meeting, I think that's a great move.
Seems a little rushed.
Yep,
So we
that's
would
what I'm getting
pull-
at.
So we would pull then the senior center fund, feasibility study money also? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I think that's a great plan.
Pick one.
Pick a building.
Yeah.
And maybe it's.
No, I think we
building,
should
but-
pull both.
Joe just said that.
No,
he's
he's saying,
better
but pick one project.
Right, so what I'm saying is, we're talking about pulling this one, I don't think that automatically means we place the feasibility for the senior center. I think whatever the timing is, we need to pick a project and move forward with that project. Right now, if we're not ready to do any of that right now, then pull them both.
Yes, that's what I was.
Can we though, I mean, to that point, this discussion is very fruitful, and everybody here, I think, is gonna have a say in that process. Would it be helpful then if we set a goal for the spring to have some joint meetings with these different boards and committees and discuss this issue specifically? Like maybe some hearings, a couple of really fruitful discussions on that, so we can, as a community, make a decision to move in the right direction.
And to your point, I think that this could fit in with our whole master plan discussion that we're hopefully trying to work towards also, is updating the town's master plan and kind of getting all of us in this room as well as other stakeholders involved in that conversation.
So would everybody here be amenable to that? Is that something that?
Yes, because we don't want this to be April all of a sudden, and
Yeah.
we're just starting to talk about it again. Not a
Same
good idea.
conversation, yeah.
But what happens to we're not gonna spend the money on something else and come spring, say we don't have any money, let's wait till the fall.
I'll be honest, Nancy, I think my concern in combining two projects of that magnitude, because community hall to me is a 4 to 5 year planning project without groundbreaking. It's massive, right? When we're talking about selection of location and design, it's gonna be a mess. If we incorporate it with a senior center that we know we need now, and probably needed 10 years ago, you're gonna, that's something, are we really looking at leaving the seniors on Glenwood Road for another decade?
Can I ask a question, Nancy? On the senior center, when you guys have had meetings on it, one of the things we talked a little bit about was a community use for that as well. Has any of that been part of what you're talking about going into planning? Is using it, making it big enough to have other uses happen in there?
It's never worked in the past to do it that way. Me personally, I think the only way it could work that way is if you had kind of two entrances to one building. So you could keep it separate when you wanted to keep it separate and do intergenerational things if you wanted to do that.
I mean, if you're gonna build a building for $100 for a senior center, and it's this big,
$100.
and you wanted to add another $20 to add almost half again, because you're already in the whole building process, you've got everything done. I mean, it seems to me we've got enough, as Leah said, enough other uses in this town that if we could somehow combine those with very little extra money, because we're already doing it. I don't know, it's just a
A
thought.
good example I like to use is Milford built a new senior center a few years ago, and they incorporated community meeting space that is separate from a lot of the space the seniors use for activities, but it has become a focal point in the town. It's a beautiful building. Something like that, I think, would be an excellent idea or a conversation to have that addresses some of the issues that Leah brought up too, with meeting space.
Holden has the same thing too,
Yeah.
where there are some fairly large events being held in that main room, but the senior rooms are secure and off to another.
And
also
to your
wing.
point too, if that were to happen, seniors, people who are now 45, 50, 55, start to become comfortable with going to that location because they're going to other community stuff. Then they go to the senior part as well. It's something to talk
Depends on
about.
how it's laid out, like I've seen in Milford.
It also, to kind of lay those fears, it also places the focal point of the community on senior issues. Because if you're in and out of that building all the time, looking at those materials, and you're in that facility, it's at the top of everybody's mind.
I think if it's done right,
Yes.
yes.
I mean, not like the one you have now.
Well, just because, you know what happens, and somebody made a very good point saying this, it's to the community, because they're just there for a purpose, like one class or one meeting, it's just a space that they have to be in. To the seniors, it's a home away from home, so
Right.
you don't have the respect.
Right.
Yeah.
So things are moved out of place and never put back, or
Yeah.
it's broken, or it's left out, that's the part we're trying to avoid. But if it's done correctly, yes.
And I think there's a big difference between meeting space for groups like this in an evening when the seniors are not typically using the building actively versus other things that are, yeah.
Right, and in Milford, the meeting space is used all the time. It's just the way it's situated.
Yep.
All the other
Totally.
activities can go on at the same time, and
Yep.
then there's a conference room with a huge organization meeting, and it works
Can we
that
get an
way.
action item?
All right.
Yeah, do it.
All right, here I
I'm
go.
gonna ask one more.
Okay.
We've talked about a lot of this stuff. Can we get an action item out of this, of what we're gonna actually do? I'm serious.
Action item is this massive warrant for November.
No.
But
I
what are
mean-
we doing about
I mean,
the
we're talking about,
item?
we're talking about $80,000 or $90,000 of we're gonna pull out of the warrant. Can we get an action item to your point, Mike, of talk to the architect, this is what we're trying to do, come up with something to bring before the select board.
So I'm guessing, let's give a deadline of January, we'll start doing information.
That's what I wanted to get at, because talk is great, but I like to see deadlines and
Absolutely.
You an
and
engineer,
goals. What's that?
You're an engineer, right?
Yeah, damn straight I am.
So do we need any money for that?
That's what I was gonna, that was the next
Before
point.
we get any official drawings or plans or anything like that, we'll probably will.
But do we have to wait till May to get that money? That's the question.
You can always call another special.
I was gonna say,
topic.
unless there's another special call between now and then,
The most popular person.
Ian, are you doing that, Ian?
but other than that, there's no money in the operating budget.
That's what I was getting
to do
at.
that.
All right, you
It's
ready
too
to
bad that
finish?
we couldn't do this.
Finish this out?
Just roll on.
All right, ready?
Roll.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah.
The only thing I would caution for my own selfish public works reasons is the three buildings you mentioned, the annex, community hall, and community center. None of them are in great shape, and they continue to deteriorate over time. And the longer you wait to make a decision, not that I'm saying that your decision process is imprudent, it is, but some investments have to be made in those buildings right now. I'm sure you could speak to several. I'm sure, Mike, you can speak to several. I just want to caution you that the longer we sit, they continue to deteriorate. If you want to possibly consider an item, one of the items you may want to consider is get somebody in to evaluate them. Where can you spend short-term money to keep those buildings up and running?
That's what I was getting
That's
at.
all I'm suggesting.
So do you wanna take one of these articles that you have, the 50 or 38,000, and just put $10,000 or $5,000 to have money set aside, to Joe's point, for architect review or for somebody to walk?
Emergency
Inventory
repair.
study or something.
Emergency
Yeah,
repair.
Let's see if we can get
I just
together.
think you want to do an evaluation. I mean, I'm new to the game, I'm only here a year. There's a lot of
Same.
stuff that's good, there's a lot of stuff that isn't so good though in those buildings, and I just think spend some short-term money to buy yourself some time to keep these facilities up and running. That's all I'm suggesting.
I agree with you, but I have to tell you, we had a walkthrough of an architect about a year and a half ago, and it was gonna cost $25,000 for him to give us his opinion as to whether the community center.
We need to find a cheaper architect.
We might be able to get a state contract, I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I overstating that the group, that our room acknowledges that the community center at the very least is a deficient building for its current use?
No doubt about it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys see that?
We made a decision. Let's get an
Should we
architect.
also
My-
consider pricing out modulars, because it sounds like that.
I would do
may-
that for May.
Yeah, right, no,
Yeah.
but I mean that's an action item that needs
Yeah.
to be,
Start looking at.
Yeah.
That's all part of the feasibility of what kind of building we want, where we want it,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
No,
That's
no,
all
no, no,
part
no,
of
And
I
where are you gonna put it?
No, it might
Where
not.
are you gonna
Right,
put
but
them?
that's part of the whole thing. So in the interim,
Yeah.
we want to do this. In the interim, we're gonna
I'm
get
not going home tonight,
modulars to
am I?
do this. It's all part
It's
of
all
that
part of the
whole
plan.
project. Keep the whole project going instead of
My-
piecemealing it.
Get
My
some room
concern
in
is
the house
exactly
all the way
what
through.
Timmy said though too, is that with the current articles on the warrant, we have to wait for May to ask for money to even talk to an architect
Yeah, I don't
about
think that's
making
right.
that plan, and there's no real, if we pull these two now, there's nothing that we can use to work with someone between now and May to keep this process going, and it's gonna be a pause button until then.
Leave it in and change the verbiage.
Well, I'm not inclined to pull the senior center feasibility. I think everybody was on the same page with that. It sounded like they want to ensure that the building gets functional use 18 hours a day, as opposed to, shutting down when the sun goes down kind of thing. But I didn't get the sense that it was anything other than that. I consider it.
I
the building
agree
is-
with,
is
that,
insufficient.
change the wording so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we can expand that a little bit to see multiple uses of the building.
Change the wording on
Yeah.
the senior.
For the
For
senior.
the senior.
Yeah,
and
and I
leave it
would
in.
pull the community 58,000.
Yeah.
Well, that's
pull
not
the-
done yet, so.
Community hall.
We'll have a
Everybody's clear
super
on
short
that.
meeting on Monday, unlike this one. I'm moving on, AQ, if anybody has any questions, 14.9, for a traffic and design study for the intersection of 68 and Wachusett Street. I think everybody knows what
68's a state road though.
gendered that.
Right?
No.
We can do the study because of the Wachusett Street.
Yeah.
We weren't given that. at the time.
68's not a state road.
Not a state road?
It's
No.
our control.
No, they plow.
This was on as a placeholder without a money item on it the last time the email was sent out, and then Ty and Bond, who Joe solicited the quote from, sent it in today.
So we did not see that.
You haven't seen that? Nope. But you know why we had that last accident a couple of.
I get it, but
Yeah.
we haven't seen it, so.
Okay.
I got it today.
No, I know, I'm not, but I'm just letting you know, we haven't,
Oh.
as a group,
Seen it.
talked.
No.
Yeah.
And I think that was our conversation at our meeting on Monday night, was we agreed that something should happen, but we didn't feel comfortable giving it a go-ahead without some dollar amount there, so that was.
Table.
All right, you're all in luck. 8 and 9, bottom of 8 and continuation of 9. We're talking about articles AR, AS, and AT. These have not yet been placed. It's an enormous amount of words, but ultimately it's the land taking of the old Leonard Israel properties.
And we had a lot of.
And there
Yes,
were
the-
questions on Monday that we want to clarify for people, because I think there was a little bit of confusion about why we would take ownership of them.
We
So
were waiting on
this-
lawyers.
Yeah, and we got that back
responses.
today.
What did she say?
So just for the whole process, because not everyone's heard it first, I'm gonna get back to that too, don't let me forget. These are all, this is 28 parcels that we have in tax title, that we were planning to go to court for. The attorney for the Israel estate is unable to find heirs for the property, so is looking to do what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure, rather than going to land court to take them in tax title. These are properties that the town was gonna own anyway, because there was no one to represent the Israel estate with the attorney at the tax court, so this would be a default judgment on behalf of the town anyway. The difference is if we go to tax court, it would cost the town $15,225 versus this, which would cost the town a total of $2,775, so it'd be saving $12,450 in the end. Just to avoid the legal fees, to avoid going to tax title court, any issues. So if you would like to see the map of the parcels, that is included in your packet here, as well as a brief description as to what deed in lieu of foreclosure is. There was a question by the planning board as to what happens with the road in the parcels. Because it's not a town-accepted road, it falls under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 183, Section 58, that states if it's not a town-accepted road, you own, your property takes care up until the center of the street. So where these properties are on both sides of the street that were never built, that would come as property of the town. It's not a town-accepted street, so it's not something that we could go in and use Chapter 90 money for, just similar to the Naquag Cemetery driveway.
Well, but Mike, we'd get the whole parcel then, not pieces of it, so
Correct.
that's what I was concerned with us getting.
Yeah.
So we do get,
Yeah.
excellent.
Mike, I meant
Plus
to ask you
Shoreland
this on Monday
Drive.
night,
All
but
these
does
people
Becky
own
have
halfway now.
any,
Yeah.
All right.
favorable or unfavorable opinion about this action?
She's very favorable on it because we're gonna get it anyway. And it's, do we get it through the longer process where we're gonna have to pay more, or do we get the same exact result now with a lot less?
And if we get it, if we go the longer process, we're still not getting any of that back taxes, it's still, we're just
Correct.
acquiring the property, so.
Yeah. This, again, similar to the other one, for me, for Becky, for Dave, the town planner too, isn't so much what are we doing with the property after we get it, it's we're gonna get it anyway. Are we gonna spend the money to get it, or are we going to take the easier process?
We're getting it with a safe program. I vote yes.
But what are we gonna do with it once we get it? Do we know yet?
She hasn't talked about it.
No, that's something we have to decide once we get it. It's like any other property.
And there are quite a few wetlands over there, so.
Well, I guess
Can't
the
really
concern
do
is,
it.
we're getting something in lieu of something that somebody owes us, so it's, we're not making anything on it, so
Yeah.
how are we gonna recoup our taxes?
Anything before.
No, but if we sell the land,
Yep.
at least we'll recoup the taxes or whatever we owe, so that's what I'm looking at.
Is that the intent to treat it as tax title and auction it? I guess that's the question.
We have several parcels that
There you
then
go.
let's take a
Tree
look at
farm.
kind of holistically and see if there's anything the town wants to keep proactively for.
You don't even need a tree fund, there's already trees there. Just
So
put
those are the
those-
exceptions and not.
Joe, our thought process, at least mine and the planning board, was if we get the whole property, you don't have to worry about those little pieces anymore. The town owns the whole our
Well,
property.
I
and make it all-
understand that, but I guess the concern is, does the town need to own all this property?
It's gonna anyway.
I understand, but, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to, the whole point of this tax
keep
title
owning
is,
it.
you wanna collect the revenue that's owed on it. The only way you're gonna accomplish that is to auction it off and sell it. And is that the intent?
I think, didn't he come in front of you guys?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
And
9 years
he came
ago.
before
He was
the
gonna try to
town,
build a
and he
senior
also went to
center.
DCR, and DCR said no.
Yeah.
Right, And-
So-
but there was a lot of wetlands there,
It's a
right?
lot of wetlands in there, so.
All right, so
There's a kid.
hopefully the night of the meeting, Randy is going to waive reading and say as presented, so nobody has to read all of that text.
Attorney Goldberg's cleaning up the language on this one as well.
Oh, thank God. And then you have one on the last page, I think you all know this has come up, so 10, this is article
AU.
for you, thank you, for recall provision. This is a placeholder. We had Skip ask about it. He did not bring in a resident petition, so it would be the board placing this if the board places it. There was a brief discussion on Monday about it. If, I think we reached out to any of the elected boards as well, because this would affect anybody who's elected, to see if you had any opinions on it. But obviously, anybody can comment on it if you'd like, and it'll be the last thing we talk about on Monday as far as whether or not it gets placed. There's really, I don't think you have any backup in there right now. You could certainly take a look at the communities.
Auburn.
Yeah, one of the Brookfields has it. Obviously, we've seen, Fall River and recall there. So there are some opportunities for looking at what other communities have. There are some differences in how they handle it. But ultimately, this is the first step in a process where it gets brought before a town meeting as a petition. It then goes to the legislature to be passed as home rule, which can take some time depending on who your reps are, how far it gets through the process or when in the legislative year. And then once it passes home rule, that's when any resident would have the opportunity to get signatures and incite a special election for recall. And Anita gave us an estimate on that, $3,000 to $6,000
Per election.
per election. You have comments? You're welcome to make them now or in writing.
Can I just ask, sorry to go back to the senior center.
Oh.
feasibility. No, because I just, no, I just thought of this for Nancy. If the thought is to keep the senior center feasibility study on, but would the 3,500, do you think that would, or 35,000, would cover the potential for them to also look at doing a joint something or another, besides just a senior center?
You'd have to ask them.
Whatever the scope you give them, like.
Like they'll ask you, what do you envision in this building? And as long as you said, I need a big room back here for.
But you think that it could
multiple
encompass
uses
that
or-
in that dollar amount?
I think so.
Oh, I
You
do
just
too.
say, and if you wanted it totally separate with
Yeah.
a different entrance, you
You
say
do.
that on a
Yeah.
wall.
You gotta write a
That's
good
why we're
RFP.
changing the
You gotta
language.
write a
You
good
tell them we're
RFP.
looking at a
Yeah.
building or a
Right.
combo building, and
Yeah.
then they study that.
That's
And
why
that
the
was
language
that's the
has
high
to.
end.
Right, no, and that's
So-
why I was wondering, because I knew you had said that was the high end of the range that you were given. I'm just circling back to if we decided to, because the hesitation is if we don't place anything, then we don't have any money to do anything until the spring. And so,
It needs to be reworded.
right, but would that be shortchanging?
No, I think we could easily work within that, especially where some of the other towns have said, listen, you can use our information.
Yeah.
You might only have to spend a percentage of that.
Yeah.
And West Boylston actually went on a very old plan that they had done probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And said it was still fine.
And what they did was they got their committee to add to it.
Yep.
But they didn't have to go through the huge expense. They had already spent, 10,000 or whatever.
I'm getting cycled all the time for free proposals.
But,
Why can't
but I
we
do,
that?
after all this conversation's gone through, it's like your own house, I do think you need to pick something and do it, and then it gives you more of a drive to do everything else, because otherwise, everything gets let go and.
Nothing happens, or it
You never
is
do anything.
piecemeal and not.
It is ridiculously late. We really appreciate everybody coming out. I think we should probably do this twice a year if we can. These stakeholder meetings, just start earlier and end earlier.
I do want to say something, if I may, please.
So before, just
Yeah.
before people start walking out,
Yes.
just remember that anybody that is in an active meeting needs a motion for adjournment, so.
Yeah.
You did?
Okay.
All right, FinCom is adjourned.
All in favor?
Go ahead, Ken.
I want to hear what he has to
Can
say.
we wait till can we
Yeah,
wait till
yeah,
meeting?
Yeah.
Since no one's addressed this recall thing, I would like to say, if I may, please, everybody,
Go ahead.
can I have my time? Thank you. no offense. Since no one is saying anything, and being an elected official myself, one of the things I think that this town does need a recall provision, because as elected officials, the people are the ones who chose us. So it gives the power to the people, and this really does give the power to the people. You know, if people give it, they can take it away. And so I really think that we, as to be an open government, we should allow this. We should have this on the warrant, and this should be hopefully voted in. And I think the people would vote it, because it gives true power to them.
Anybody else? All right, so we're going around. I think FinCom started.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
You already did.
Already did.
Yeah.
Closed, we're off.
Do you need Mitch, right?
Make a motion
Yeah.
to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll be around.
All in favor?
I'm gonna be in a little.
And the board?
Motion to adjourn the select board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.